with Fairy Tail's team Natsu defeating, but not killing, the water dragon god Merkphobia, they have triumphed over their first dragon god of the Pentadrakes. The arc concluded on a sweet note with Merkphobia beginning a normal life with Caramel. However, tougher challenges await Natsu and his friends. We've already got a glimpse of how crazy powerful the fire dragon god Ignia is. But just how scary could the wood dragon god be? We'll find out soon enough. So let's get started. After Natsu and his team successfully trapped the water god dragon, they left Elmina to search for their next target, Aldrin, the wood god dragon. To find him, they headed to Drasil, the largest city on the continent of Giltina. They first went to the town of Tekka to catch a train. Natsu complained, saying he didn't want to take the train and suggested they run instead, making it part of their training. Urza was irritated by his suggestion, taking out her luggage, and saying it was impossible to run to Drasil. Natsu asked how she managed to bring so much stuff. Gray commented that Natsu should just give up, as it was only an 8-hour trip. Wendy felt dizzy hearing they would be on the train for 8 hours. But before that, Lucy mentioned they had 3 hours before the train left. Happy got excited about the free time, and Carla suggested they eat at a restaurant because she was hungry. Urza was surprised when she noticed people staring at her. Lucy also felt they were being watched, and Gray agreed. Urza asked one of the locals if it was rare for them to see people from Ishgar there. The local asked if she was Urkies while blushing. Suddenly, people swarmed Urza, asking for her autograph. She was shocked and confused, saying she wasn't the Urkies they were referring to. Everyone around her was extremely excited, calling her cool. Urza tried to stop them. Natsu and the others wondered who this Urkies was and what was happening. Gray was curious if someone in the town looked like Urza. Just then, a woman who looked exactly like Urza appeared behind them, wearing a turtleneck and glasses. She was curious upon seeing Urza. Natsu's eyes widened, realizing there really was another Urza. She hushed them, and when Gray and Wendy turned around, they were also shocked while people continued to chase Urza. The woman invited them to follow her to a place called Fairy Nail. Lucy couldn't believe what she saw. It was named similarly to their guild, Fairy Tail, but was called Fairy Nail. Urkies clarified that it was a celebrity guild. Urza was curious about this, and Wendy asked if it was a guild for stars. Urkies explained that the guild was made up of famous and successful celebrities such as singers, models, and of course, actors. Standing in front of Urza, Urkies said she couldn't believe the coincidence. The celebrities in the guild looked exactly like them. Urza couldn't deny their resemblance. Since they were already there, Urkies invited them to take a look inside. They were excited about it. Upon entering, they saw someone who looked like Natsu, dressed in an Elvis Presley outfit, drinking coffee on a couch. Natsu was surprised to see him, and Lucy commented that they really did look alike. He was the biggest star of Fairy Nail, named Nak. Nak called for his manager, whom he called Germaine, and suddenly, a woman who looked exactly like Lucy appeared. Lucy was shocked to see that she was a manager there. The woman's name was Lucia. Nak was furious, complaining that he always told her lukewarm coffee wasn't acceptable. Lucia apologized profusely. Nak added that he wouldn't accept a bad role. Lucia replied that they were negotiating for a project where he would play that role. Nak cornered her and said that if he didn't want to do it, he wouldn't. Gray commented that Natsu's counterpart seemed messed up. Lucy told him to stop treating her like that. Wendy then saw Gray's lookalike, named Glenn, who was a pole dancer. Gray blushed upon hearing that and was shocked to see him dancing and naked in front of a crowd. Lucy wondered why he was embarrassed. Urkies explained that showcasing one's body was an art. She pointed to another topless dancer named Javina, who greeted Glenn and praised his performance. Glenn responded that Javina was still the best. Lucy wondered why they used honorifics with each other, while Natsu was imagining things, along with her pet cat, Bappy. Happy couldn't accept that he was just an ordinary cat there. But there was another cat, a black one named Bibby. On stage, they saw a married stand-up comedian duo named Gazel and Lizzie performing. Mina Jane and Lee Sala, who were busy posing in front of the camera, were models. Gray noticed that Mira-Jane's look-alike there wasn't much different. Next, they were introduced to a makeup artist named Elvman, who was talking to his sister Mina, telling her that her skin had been breaking out lately. Gray was shocked by this. Then, they were shown a famous rock band called Lacris and the Lightning King people. The main vocalist looked like Laxus, and his band members resembled the Thunder God tribe members. There was a foot model named Kara and a cornstarch named Loki. Everyone was astonished by what they saw. Every fairy tale member had a look-alike in that place. Wendy commented that it reminded her of Idolas. Gray noticed that even in Idolas, Mira-Jane hadn't changed much. Urza asked what Urkis did there, and she replied that she was a stage actress. Happy and Carla mentioned that she seemed very popular because everyone outside wanted a picture with her. Urkis shyly admitted that she was having a hard time with her next role. Urza said she knew a bit about acting and asked Urkis where she was struggling. Lucy and the others were puzzled by this, recalling a previous job where Urza had awkwardly played her prince. Urkis explained that the role she was struggling with was that of a woman in love, and she had no experience with romantic love. Urza blushed at this. Meanwhile, Nak was visibly frustrated with his manager, Lucia. He refused to accept roles that made him look dumb. Lucia apologized, and Nak dragged her into the staff room, saying he would punish her a bit. Lucy was irritated by how Nak treated her look-alike and decided she couldn't stand it, planning to confront him about bullying her look-alike. As she approached the room, Urkis stopped her. Lucy blushed at what she overheard. Natsu was curious about what had happened, and Lucy, embarrassed, said she didn't know. Urkis clarified that this was just how the two treated each other, but there was something between them. She added that when they were in the guild, they did inappropriate things together. Lucy said there was no need to tell them about that. That's also a form of love, said Urkis, even though she knew a lot about what was going on with them. Urza asked if Urkis hadn't experienced it yet, so she didn't understand. They still had some time before the train left, so if Urkis was okay with it, Urza said she would be happy to listen. Gray teased Urza, saying she didn't have much experience either, and Lucy said the same thing to Gray, but happy, said Lucy too. Carla proudly stated that none of them knew anything about romance. After a few hours, the group was at the train station. Natsu was laughing at them while Lucy seemed traumatized by the events. Gray smiled and said it had been a long time since he saw Juvia, and he was curious about how she was doing. Wendy corrected him, saying it was Juvina, not Juvia. Gray blushed, thinking about romantic love and Juvia. Lucy asked Urza what she and Urkis had talked about since their conversation was long and serious. Wendy was puzzled by her not able to respond. Urza said that they discussed many topics. As the train started moving, the Dragon Slayers, Natsu and Wendy, began feeling sick. Urza, staring at the floor, said she couldn't do it after all. Natsu lay on Lucy's lap, and Lucy asked Urza what had happened. Urza apologized and took out her glasses. She admitted she was Urkis. The real Urza had told her that if she couldn't stay in character, Urza would perform on stage instead. The audience was irritated by Urza's monotone performance, wondering what had happened to Urkis and why her acting was so bad. Meanwhile, Urza was proud of her performance, but the audience demanded refunds. None of them had expected that outcome. The train carrying Natsu and his group was on its way to Drasil but had a stopover in Rain Hill. Natsu and Wendy were thrilled about it. Urza couldn't believe they had a 2-hour stopover. Carla explained that it was normal for stopovers to be that long on this continent. Happy commented that the place was very laid back. Lucy decided to step out for some fresh air, followed by Natsu and Wendy. Urza reminded them not to miss the train. Gray asked if Urza wasn't going to step out, but she said she'd stay and watch their luggage. Gray then said he would take a walk. He stretched outside and enjoyed the fresh air, saying that Wendy could just eat the air there. Gray was surprised to see Juvia, and she was equally surprised to see him. Gray called her Juvia, but she called him Glenn. It was then that Gray realized she was Juvina, one of the performers from the guild in Tekka. She was delighted, noting that he looked exactly like Glenn. Gray said that she looked exactly like Juvia. Juvina hushed him, insisting he call her Juvina dearest. This caught Gray off guard. He asked if she was there for work. She confirmed and asked if he knew what her job was. She teasingly asked if he wanted to see, starting to take off her clothes. Gray, with his eyes closed, said he wasn't interested in such things. Javina laughed, saying she was only joking and wouldn't do it unless she was paid. Suddenly, Gray took off his clothes, telling her not to surprise him like that, which surprised Javina instead. Gray wondered where his coat had gone. Javina asked if he liked taking off his clothes. He said no, it was just an old habit, and he put his coat back on. Gray was curious if Javina wasn't embarrassed to do that in front of others, especially since she was a woman. Javina replied that she enjoyed her work. Gray said, "I see," which puzzled Javina. He clarified that it was nothing, but Javina understood he was conflicted, thinking about other men seeing the body of his beloved Juvia. Gray denied it, saying they just looked alike but were different people. Javina laughed, noting he didn't deny his feelings for Juvia. She asked if Juvia was his lover. Gray said no, that wasn't their relationship. Gray, now free, was pulled by Javina along for a date. They ate at a restaurant, shopped, and walked around, with Gray unconsciously taking off his shirt again. It was clear they both enjoyed the date. Afterward, they talked. Gray asked why she liked being called dearest. Javina explained it was because she was a star. She also asked if he wasn't curious about her relationship with Glenn. Gray replied he wasn't. Javina admitted that Glenn didn't pay attention to her at all. She was always the one making the moves, and since he seemed cold towards her, she was thinking of giving up. Gray was shocked by this, and Javina called Glenn a jerk, saying he should know her feelings. Gray apologized on Glenn's behalf. Javina sighed and said that during important moments, Glenn always avoided her, but she was okay with it. She looked up at the sky and said she preferred to love more than to be loved because it made her happy. Gray smiled and said he wished they could do something for people who were unclear about their feelings. Javina agreed, saying it would be better if they just told them if they didn't like them. Gray replied that he didn't hate her, but he was actually referring to Juvia. Javina smiled, noting that he and Glenn were alike. Gray admitted he cared a lot about Juvia but felt he wasn't good enough for her right now. Javina asked when he thought he would be enough as she walked away. Gray watched her leave as she said goodbye, mentioning she had work to do. Suddenly, Javina revealed her body to the shocked Gray, winking and saying it was on the house. Gray blushed, thinking that while they looked alike, Javina was definitely a different person. He remembered that Juvia had a scar on her side because of him. As she left, Javina told him not to assume that Juvia would always wait for him, calling him lover boy. Gray knew this, which was why he was building his self-confidence. He vowed to become someone who could protect her and then meet her again with his head high. Javina smiled at his words. Glenn arrived and asked if she had waited long. Gray hadn't expected to see him again. Glenn noticed Gray, and Javina commented on their resemblance, but stressed that Glenn is cooler. He asked if Gray had done anything with his woman, which puzzled Gray. Javina apologized and said they were already going out, and Glenn agreed that she was his girl. Gray couldn't believe what he was hearing. Urza had told them about the situation. Javina approached Gray and said Juvia seemed sad. She added that she wasn't a topless dancer and, of course, Glenn wouldn't let other men see his partner's body. Javina remembered her conversation with Urkis, where she mentioned working at a place where they danced in swimsuits. Urkis was too naive and took her jokes seriously. This made Gray ask what she had done earlier. Javina whispered that it was their little secret. Glenn grew curious about what they were hiding. The two said their goodbyes, and Javina told Gray to take care of Juvia. Gray felt overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Back on the train, Lucy complained to Urza about what Natsu had done. Natsu played innocent, saying it was just 1 or 2 layers. Lucy was furious, accusing him of burning all the way to her underwear. Urza asked what he had been up to. Wendy explained that Natsu had tried to get rid of the men who were hitting on Lucy but had gone overboard, according to Happy. Even they had been caught in the flames. Natsu laughed but suddenly felt nauseous as the train started moving. Lucy teased him while he apologized. Urza noticed Gray sitting quietly and asked if something had happened. He replied that nothing was wrong, just that he was wondering how Juvia was doing. Suddenly, someone answered, saying she was doing fine. Everyone was shocked to hear this. It was Juvia herself, now on the train with them, saying long time no see. She had decided to join them. Gray, sweating, asked why Juvia Dearest was there. Juvia, surprised, asked why he called her Dearest. Gray quickly retracted it. Finally, they arrived in Drasil, the center of the Giltina continent. They were thrilled because it was even larger than Crocus. The place was bustling with people, so Carla reminded Wendy not to get lost. Juvia excitedly pointed out a cute bakery to Gray, but he kept a poker face, recalling their conversation on the train. He asked Juvia why she came along, and she replied that it was, of course, to follow him. Urza was surprised that Juvia had found them. Juvia, feeling giddy, said her radar for Gray was on another level. Happy noted that now that she was there wasn't much they could do. Carla wondered if everything's the same in the guild. Juvia thought for a moment and then said that nothing had happened and everything was fine, though Gray didn't quite believe her. Back in Drasil, Urza suggested they look for a place to stay. Lucy wanted a large place, but Carla reminded them that they didn't have much money. Natsu said a small place would be fine, and Wendy wondered why Natsu looked at her when he said, small. At the inn they chose, Juvia was surprised to learn that she couldn't know anything about the 100 Years quest. Urza felt bad for her since she had traveled so far to join them, but they had signed a contract, and there was nothing they could do. They cannot breach the contract since it involved the name of Fairy Tale. Juvia replied that it's fine. Lucy asked if this meant she couldn't spend time with them. Happy suggested adding Juvia as a member, but Urza said the contract was final. Juvia said she will go home right away, as her main goal was just to see Gray. Gray told her to wait patiently. Juvia asked if he promised to come back, and he said yes, eventually. Juvia sighed, worried, but Lucy assured her there was nothing to worry about since Gray would be with them. Juvia was more worried because Lucy was close to Gray and saw her as a love rival. Lucy denied this and told Juvia not to think that way. In that case, Natsu suggested they start gathering information for the job tomorrow. Urza agreed and said, for today, they'd party. Everyone was excited. They headed straight to a restaurant where they all enjoyed eating. They loved the food and filled themselves up. They just enjoyed each other's company. Later that evening, while walking back, Urza scolded Natsu because they got kicked out earlier because of him being too wild. She said he was embarrassing. Natsu replied that it wasn't just his fault. Meanwhile, Lucy was busy studying the map. Wendy asked if there was something wrong. Lucy had been looking at the map of the place for a while and noticed that the area had a strange shape. Meanwhile, Natsu mentioned that he might have eaten too much, while Juvia thanked everyone. She said she had no intention of disturbing their work and would leave tomorrow. Gray said he was also happy to see her again after a long time. Juvia smiled while Gray seemed to notice something about her. He asked if something had changed about her. Juvia was curious if there was something strange. Gray explained that earlier, when they were talking about the guild, she seemed hesitant to answer his questions. Juvia went blank when asked if something had happened at the guild. She started sweating, trying to remember but couldn't recall anything. She then said, if she remembers correctly, there was a new member in the guild, but she thought this person seemed suspicious. Gray was surprised by this. Juvia placed her hand on Gray's shoulder, which puzzled him, and told him to be careful of the white mage. Gray was shocked when she suddenly fainted. Everyone became concerned. Gray tried to wake her up, but she remained unconscious. Happy grew worried about the strange sound they heard. It seemed like there was a massive earthquake as the ground started moving. Everyone was stunned to see the ground rising. Natsu felt dizzy and asked what was going on. But Lucy noticed that the locals seemed unfazed and were acting like everything was normal. A woman sitting nearby asked if they were travelers. She inquired if they came to Drasil without any information. When Lucy asked what was happening, the woman explained that this event occurred every day at the same time, so the locals were used to it. She wasn't surprised they were shocked since it was their first time. Wendy was curious about the daily occurrence at the same time. The woman reassured them, saying it would stop soon and suggested they just sit down. Lucy lost her balance due to the shaking ground. The woman suggested they pray for the great trees. Lucy asked what she meant by that. Just then, the map Lucy was holding flew up, and she finally figured out the shape of the area that had puzzled her. She realized that the shape of the city of Drasil, when viewed from a distance, was a hand. Urza was shocked. The surroundings darkened, and Wendy couldn't believe that the place they were in was a hand. The woman confirmed it, saying it was the right hand of Drasil. They were shocked to realize that this was the Aldrin's right-hand city, the Wood God Dragon. All the fairy tale members couldn't believe that the city was on top of Aldrin's hand. Natsu stood up, noticing the shadow of the dragon. He knew it was big, but he hadn't realized just how enormous it truly was. They continued to the inn, where they laid Juvia on a bed. Lucy hoped she would be okay, as she seemed to be sleeping deeply. Gray noticed something strange. Juvia had mentioned being careful of the white mage. Natsu wondered who the white mage was, saying it sounded familiar. Wendy remembered that Caramel had used that term when she asked for the Water God Dragon's power to be limited. Lucy wondered why Juvia had said that, and if something had happened at the guild. Everyone was concerned. They decided to watch over Juvia and see if she could tell them more when she woke up. But they also needed to think about Aldrin. Natsu was curious about being on top of Aldrin's hand. Wendy couldn't believe there was a town on top of the dragon they were looking for. Even more surprising was that there were towns of similar size on his left hand, back, and shoulders, making a total of 5 towns. It's so big that it seemed unreal. Natsu said they needed to figure out a way to give it an ass kick. However, before thinking about how to trap the dragon, the biggest question was what to do about the towns. Natsu was puzzled by this. Wendy explained that the people coexisted with Aldrin, so trapping him could affect all 5 towns. Natsu couldn't believe they were facing the same dilemma again, dealing with a dragon that wasn't inherently evil. Gray pointed out that they needed more information before making any decisions. Urza agreed, saying they would gather more information. Gray and Wendy stayed behind to watch over Juvia, while the others went out to explore. They wondered if the dragon was just resting its face on the ground during the day and stretching at predetermined times. They also questioned how people had thought to build a city on top of a dragon. Urza suggested that the people might have built the city not knowing it was a dragon. However, they must have realized it eventually, but still, the dragon moved slightly every day. Suddenly, someone mentioned that it was Aldrin's wish, or so he's heard. He claimed it was from the time of his great-great-great-grandfather, about 500 years ago, that the Wood Divine Dragon, Aldrin, himself had asked them to build a town on his body, so he's heard. For what purpose? Lucy asked. He didn't know. That was just what he had heard. He asked if they were travelers, and Urza confirmed they were and that they had come from Ishgar. He offered to guide them around the town, which delighted Lucy and Urza. However, Natsu felt something was off, saying the old man had a strange smell. He pointed out the shopping district where tourists always go. That's what he had heard. Lucy wondered why he kept repeating that phrase. He showed them Aldrin goods, saying the most popular items were Aldrin dolls. That's what he had heard. Next, he pointed out the right-hand middle finger park. That's what he had heard. He also showed them the Ring Finger Amusement Park, the Little Finger Lake, and St. Ration's Church. That's what he had heard. They were amazed by the size of the church. Inside the church, he explained that the people of Drasil never forget to pray towards the earth, referring to Aldrin. They were there, thanks to Aldrin's abundant ground. He smiled and said they wouldn't let anyone who threatened Aldrin go unchecked. That's what he had heard. Suddenly, the door behind them closed, and candles along the aisle lit up. They were startled. They were suddenly surrounded by many people in robes, looking like a cult. They were surprised when he revealed that this was one of the churches of the White Mage. That's what he had heard. He then said they had committed 2 sins. First, they had powerful magic, which was against the teachings of white magic. Second, they had come to destroy Aldrin. Urza was shocked by how much he knew. Suddenly, Mira-Jane, also in a robe, approached. She told Urza that the white mage knew everything. Everyone was stunned to see Mira-Jane there and asked why. Natsu realized it was Mira-Jane's smell all along. Mira-Jane suddenly attacked Urza, who dodged and asked what she was doing. Mira-Jane challenged her to play like old times. They were all shocked as more people revealed their faces. It turned out to be the entire fairy tale guild. They wondered why everyone, including Jalal, was there. Urza asked what was happening. They lined up and revealed the white mage. The white mage stated that, honestly, she didn't care about Aldrin. Aldrin was just another evil that would someday be erased into whiteness. For now, her focus was on the fairy tale members. Once they were all dealt with, fairy tale would belong to her. "Who the hell are you?" Natsu asked. He mentioned that Toka always talked about him, but he doesn't even remember her. The white mage laughed, and Natsu didn't expect that. They were told to wait a moment. The white mage asked Mira-Jane to explain because it seemed their numbers were off. Mira-Jane clarified that she had brought Natsu and the others as instructed, but the white mage reminded her that the order was to bring everyone. Mira-Jane apologized. "What are you saying?" Urza asked. The white mage suddenly ordered Elfman and Lisana to punish Mira-Jane. They began stepping on their sister, calling her useless for not listening properly to the white mage's orders. Natsu asked them to stop, but Gajeel approached him and threatened him not to interfere. Lucy trembled with fear, and Urza broke into a sweat upon seeing Jalal. Lucy started crying, wondering if this was just a bad dream. The white mage questioned if it was Toka's fault that their numbers doesn't add up. Back at the inn, Juvia woke up and revealed that they were all being controlled by the white mage. They couldn't understand what she meant. Juvia explained that she could share this information with them because of Toka, who was another person living inside the white mage. Gray found it incredibly hard to believe. Juvia added that, for some reason, the white mage had let everyone live for now, but anyone could die depending on her mood. Therefore, they needed to save everyone as soon as possible. Back at the church, Natsu asked the white mage what she had done to everyone. She replied that she had tainted them all white. This puzzled Urza. The white mage explained that Fairy Tail didn't agree with their doctrine because it was a guild full of incredibly strong magic, so she needed to keep an eye on them. Urza couldn't understand what she was saying. The white mage reassured her that she would understand once they end up white too. She raised her hand towards them, and they felt themselves weakening as their magic and power were being drained. However, Wendy quickly used her body anomaly reversal magic. The white mage didn't expect this, and Natsu and the others regained their magic. Suddenly, Gray cast an ice make wall, surprising everyone. Gray's timely arrival to help was a relief. He created a large and thick ice barrier. They were glad to see Gray. Juvia told them to step back since all their comrades were controlled. Urza was surprised to see Juvia and Carla there too. Gray was confident that the ice wall was strong enough to hold. But when the white mage ordered Laxus to break the wall, he shattered it with his fist. Gray couldn't believe it. They decided to flee and ran away quickly. Gajeel and Laxus wanted to pursue them, but the white mage told them not to. It wasn't important since they would come back eventually. The white mage laughed. She said she would return to her original plan, which had been slightly altered. They would turn Aldrin white using everyone's power. Outside, the group discussed their next move. Natsu was shocked to learn that all their comrades had lost their magic power. It seemed impossible that the white mage possessed such an enormous amount of power. They realized they had underestimated her abilities. Juvia explained that there were two personalities, the white mage and Toka. The white mage was the one that said earlier that she would turn everyone white and take away everyone's magic power. Toka, on the other hand, had a genuine heart and affection for Natsu. Lucy teased Natsu about this, but he replied that he didn't know her. Juvia admitted that she had also been controlled by the white mage before, but Toka had managed to free her without the white mage noticing. That's why she came to inform them about this. Urza asked if there was more information. Juvia revealed that the white mage's plan was to white out the 5 dragon gods. Happy asked what that meant. Essentially, she would turn them all white. In the whiteout condition, all their magic power would be controlled by the white mage. From none to maximum capacity, depending on the white mage's will, she could control them one by one. The first step in the 5 dragon gods' whiteout plan was Merkphobia, the water dragon god. Happy mentioned that Caramel had requested that from the white mage. Carla added that it might have triggered the event, but in the end, it did result in a whiteout. The white mage planned to use the power of the water dragon god to white out the remaining 4 dragons. However, since the water dragon god was defeated, she had to change her plan. Gray was shocked when Juvia said that Fairy Tail had been chosen as a replacement for the water dragon god to provide the power needed to white out the 5 dragon gods. Was this good or bad luck? Juvia asked. Originally, the white mage's plan was that once everyone in Fairy Tail was whited out, she would kill them all. But they're alive now because the water dragon god was defeated. At the moment, the lives of our guild members are in the hands of the white mage, Juvia said, alarming everyone. Isn't there any other way to save them? Natsu asked. Juvia started to say they could defeat the white mage, but Natsu interrupted, saying it was possible then. Just like she said, everyone's lives are in the hands of the white mage. One word, die, and everyone in the guild will be gone. They couldn't accept that, and Wendy started crying. Suddenly, the ground moved again. They were surprised since it usually moved at specific times. We then see hands placed on an orb. It was some of the Fairy Tail Guild members. They had managed to break what the white mage called the right-hand orb. Juvia then repeated what the white mage had said. They were puzzled when she mentioned the right-hand orb. Juvia explained that if the left-hand orb and shoulder orbs were destroyed, Aldrin would lose his power. The white mage had said she couldn't destroy them with her power alone, but with the combined strength of everyone, they could. They cheered for this plan. Juvia added that the white mage had ordered the Fairy Tail members to leave. Juvia suddenly snapped back to reality, and they asked if she was okay. Juvia explained that those were the words of the white mage, shared with them by Toka. Urza couldn't believe the white mage planned to destroy the orbs of the towns using their friends. Wendy said they couldn't allow this. This meant they would have to go to the other 4 towns. Lucy suddenly stopped them. Even if they couldn't defeat the white mage, they might be able to save each friend individually. They were surprised by this idea. Lucy mentioned Wendy's healing magic. Wendy said it wouldn't work if they were controlled, but if they were passed out, it might be a different story. Natsu laughed excitedly, realizing they could save their friends by fighting them. He was all fired up for Fairy Tail's battle in Drasil. Urza agreed they might be able to do something, but it would be difficult to fight Laxus, Mirajane, Jalal, and Gajil, Gray noted. Wendy added that it was a relief Gildarts wasn't there. Natsu said it didn't matter. He could defeat them, controlled or not. Natsu, full of excitement, rushed ahead. The others tried to stop him, saying he couldn't handle it alone, but he laughed and said he could definitely take down Laxus, Gajil, Mirajane, and Jalal. Fired up for the fighting festival, he ran ahead with Happy following closely. Carla couldn't understand why he was so excited, especially since he would be fighting his friends. Gray explained that for Natsu, it was like a contest to see who was the strongest. Urza said they should also get going, as the rest of their friends were heading to the 4 cities in the area. They couldn't allow them to be used for the white mage's plan. Everyone agreed and started running. While running, Urza thought about why Jalal was involved. He really was a troublemaker, but she couldn't dwell on that now. Back with the white mage, she told the Fairy Tail members they had 2 objectives. First, to defeat Aldrin, they needed to destroy the remaining 4 orbs. The second objective was to kill Natsu and his companions, eliminating anyone against the White Doctrine. Everyone listened carefully and prepared to follow her orders. They split into different groups and left, including Master Makarov. Meanwhile, Gray, Lucy, Urza, and Wendy also separated. Natsu, hyped up, said he would take them all down at once. Gray and Juvia were together. Gray asked if the idea was to defeat their friends one at a time. Juvia confirmed this. Gray then asked why she was following him. Blushing, Juvia said it had been a while since it was just the 2 of them. Gray reminded her this wasn't the time to joke around. Juvia understood and revealed the truth. She couldn't use her magic right now. This surprised Gray. Even if the hypnosis was gone, the white mage still seemed to control her magic power. The magic power of everyone might not return unless the enchantment from the white mage was removed. That means there's no hope of increasing our strength every time we free someone from the fairy tale guild, Gray realized. Juvia, almost in tears, pleaded that since she didn't have magic, he should protect her. Sighing, he told her not to leave his side. Overjoyed, Juvia asked him to repeat what he said. Suddenly, Bixlow appeared. As always, flirting again, he commented. Gray and Juvia were surprised to see him. It's been a while. Do you remember the Battle of Fairy Tale when I beat you to a pulp? Bixlow grinned. Gray retorted that the battle was unfair and challenged him to fight fairly this time. Bixlow said he wasn't sure. From behind, Freed attacked suddenly, surprising Gray and injuring his left arm. Then, Evergreen appeared and used her fairy bomb gremlin. Gray was thrown back, but managed to land on his feet. He told Juvia to hide somewhere, and she agreed. Those who didn't accept the White Doctrine would be judged by the Thunder Legion, they said. What are you saying? Gray asked. They are supposed to be Laxus cult. Switching to Lucy, she was alone and spotted by some fairy tale guild members. It was the siblings Mira-Jane, Lysana, and Elfman. Of all people, Lucy couldn't believe she had to face Mira-Jane. So, she opened the gate of the lion, and Loki appeared, sensing a problem. Loki bluntly stated they probably couldn't defeat Mira-Jane. Lucy agreed and called Virgo as well. Long time no see, Princess, Virgo greeted. But even with three of them, Virgo wasn't sure they could win against Mira-Jane. Their situation was dire, but they had no choice now. The three of them prepared for battle. Meanwhile, Natsu had knocked down Mikau and Wakaba. You need more training, Natsu remarked. Romeo charged at him, but Natsu easily knocked him down with one hit. He became alert when he noticed Gajeel charging at him. The two stared intensely at each other. Gajeel's attack was powerful, but Natsu managed to dodge it. Gajeel kicked at him, but Natsu avoided it. Gajeel smiled and said he was going to kill him. Natsu, also excited, remarked that it had been a long time since they had a serious fight. The two dragon slayers faced off. As Gajeel asked Natsu to come, he attacked without hesitation. He punched with his right hand, but Gajeel blocked it. Natsu countered with his left, but Gajeel dodged and retaliated with a kick. Natsu was thrown back, but managed to land on his feet. Gajeel attacked again with such force that the trees behind Natsu were sliced, but Natsu ducked just in time. Natsu closed in on Gajeel, who laughed and headbutted him. The impact knocked Natsu to the ground. Gajeel reminded him that his scales were made of iron. Natsu, bleeding from his head, didn't let Gajeel take advantage of the situation. He tumbled away and reminded Gajeel that his fire could melt iron. Unbothered, Gajeel suddenly disappeared, surprising Natsu. Gajeel reappeared in front of him and used Iron Shadow Dragon's club. The powerful uppercut sent Natsu flying. He managed to land on his feet, but Gajeel charged again with Dragon Slayer secret arts. Happy worried if Natsu could stop it, as Gajeel launched into Karma Demon, Iron God Sword. Natsu blocked the sword with his hand. The clash was intense. Gajeel noted that things were different now compared to their past fights. The ground crumbled under their fierce attacks, but Natsu smiled and said he felt it too. Natsu activated Flame Lightning Dragon mode, which sent Gajeel flying. Unfazed, Gajeel said it was time for Salamander to get serious. Natsu's body ignited in flames, and he declared he would wake Gajeel up. Gajeel's face showed his excitement. Meanwhile, Happy worried for Natsu but was suddenly called by Lily. Lily challenged him to settle their stuff, brandishing his sword. Happy was confused about what stuff Lily was referring to. Lily explained that since Gajeel and Natsu were fighting, they, as their partners, should also fight to the death. Happy disagreed but was told he would soon understand the White Doctrine where everything becomes white. Happy started to cry from fear, feeling it was impossible for him to win. He was momentarily distracted while Natsu and Gajeel continued their intense battle. Suddenly, Lily's aura changed, and he walked away, seeming to cry in a corner. Seizing the opportunity, Happy used a fish he had to strike Lily on the back, causing Lily to fall unconscious. Happy was overjoyed, declaring that he had defeated Lily. Meanwhile, Mira-Jane and her siblings, who was fighting Lucy, used her Satan's soul spell and transformed. She wondered aloud how she should punish her, causing Virgo to blush and express her willingness to be punished, even suggesting restraints or shaming tactics, which she seemed to enjoy. Virgo blushed when Mira-Jane hit her. Lucy scolded Virgo, so she asked if she should request something more from Mira-Jane. Elfman then charged at Lucy, but Loki intervened, declaring he would fight Elfman. As the leader of the 12 Celestial Spirit Eclipse Gate, Lion Leo would defeat him for his wife. Elfman transformed using Beast Soul, were Lion, catching Loki off guard. With a single punch, Elfman sent Loki flying. Elfman challenged Loki to see who the best lion was. Realizing Elfman's strength, Loki smiled. Meanwhile, Lysana attacked Lucy, transforming with Animal Soul Cat and scratching her, tearing Lucy's clothes. Lucy pleaded with Lysana to open her eyes, but Lysana insisted it was Lucy who needed to understand. They all needed to become white together. Lucy couldn't believe how fast Lysana was, but revealed she had a new ultimate move. Showing the mark on her hand, she apologized to Lysana for possibly hurting her. Lysana wondered what the symbol meant, and Lucy revealed it was her star dress combination, Leo and Virgo form. "That's the star dress mix," said Loki, referring to the fused form using his and Virgo's powers. Lysana admired it, remarking on its beauty. However, Lucy knew she wouldn't be able to wield both powers as they are. Plus, as due to their strength, the effect doesn't last long. They needed to hurry and finish their battle. Lysana revealed her own trump card, transforming with Animal Soul, Nine-Tailed Fox, and attacking with Fox Impact. Lucy wasn't about to give up. She countered with Regulus Light, Spicus Shine, Lion Maiden. The powerful combination caused a massive explosion around them. Finally, Lysana was struck down. Mira-Jane was concerned for her sister. With a bit more chance, Lucy might even be able to defeat Mira-Jane and Elfman as well. The impressive explosion left Elfman worried, while Loki smiled. At last, Lucy managed to take down her opponents. Panting heavily, she couldn't believe how quickly she had changed. She noticed Lysana lying on the ground and apologized to her. But then, Elfman and Mira-Jane stood in front of them. They were furious that Lucy had attacked their youngest sibling, declaring they wouldn't forgive her. Loki was surprised that they remained intact after such an attack. He understood Mira-Jane's strength, but was puzzled by Elfman's resilience. Lucy wondered what had happened to Virgo, only to find her tied up at the side, admitting defeat. Lucy pondered how she could possibly defeat Mira-Jane. Meanwhile, the White Mage thought about her minions and Fairy Tale and commanded them to destroy the remaining 4 orbs quickly. By doing so, she would gain the power of Aldrin, the Wood Dragon God. With that power, she believed she could eventually combat the Fire Dragon God and others. Elsewhere, Carla was carrying Windy as they searched for the city on the right shoulder. They knew they needed to find the orb. Spotting a light where the orb might be, they headed straight for it. In the left-hand city, Urza searched alone for the orb in the area. She noticed a light and wondered if the orb was there. Jet and Droy confronted her, telling her to prepare herself. However, she easily defeated the two. Urza couldn't believe they were controlled by the White Mage, yet were still so weak. She told them they needed more training. Urza then headed towards the source of the light and found Jalal guarding the orb. He told her not to interfere. This was Urza's first time seeing the orb. She asked Jalal why he was there. He replied that he followed the White Mage and ended up there. He learned about the beauty of the White Doctrine. Urza was disappointed and decided she had to fight him. She used her clear heart clothing and challenged him. Jalal removed his cloak, surprising Urza. He told her to come at him. She blushed and asked why he undressed. Jalal said it was because she was in front of him. Urza didn't expect that and thought he was going crazy. Nevertheless, she knew she had to defeat him quickly. Meanwhile, in the right-hand city, the battle between Natsu and Gajeel was still intense. Gray was also fighting the Thunder God tribe. Since Juvia had no powers, she hid on the sidelines, watching the battle. They attacked Gray simultaneously. Freed attacked Gray in the side with his sword while Evergreen kicked him. Juvia couldn't believe what they were doing. She couldn't stand seeing her beloved being trampled with her bare feet, considering Evergreen a love rival. She wanted to intervene but remembered she couldn't use magic. With no other options, she cheered for Gray from a distance. It was 3 against 1, and Gray was clearly struggling. He admitted it was complicated fighting 3 opponents, so he used Ice Make to freeze them all, but he noticed his magic wasn't working. Freed smiled. He had used magic to prevent anyone from using ice magic there. Juvia thought it was unfair. Evergreen said he could use other kinds of magic, and they were being kind. Bixlow added that it seemed Gray would be defeated in the same way again. Freed clarified that no one could change that technique. Gray laughed and said that meant he could only use the demon's portion of Devil Slayer magic. He warned he wasn't responsible for what happens next. Bixlow was surprised to hear about Gray's demon's power, while Evergreen was ready for it. Juvia was still nervous on the sidelines, especially when Freed mentioned he would also use demon magic. Freed used the power of darkness and transformed. Gray charged at him, and Freed used Severing Shadow in response. Freed was struck and injured. Bixlow and Evergreen were shocked. Gray wasted no time and targeted Evergreen next. Bixlow was nervous, knowing he was next. He quickly used the Baryon formation, but Gray easily took him down. Freed couldn't believe how strong Gray's power was. Gray then grabbed Freed's face and slammed it into the ground, causing the ground to crack. The others couldn't believe what they were seeing. Freed, however, did not give up and cast Darkness Ecrature, Pain with his fingers. It hit Gray, but it seemed to have no effect on him, which puzzled the fallen Freed. Gray continued to punch Freed in the face, his aura noticeably different as he kept hitting him. Evergreen and Bixlow attacked simultaneously with stone and figurine eyes. Surprisingly, Gray vanished from their sight. They wondered where he had gone. Unbeknownst to them, Gray was already behind them. Gray made them look at each other. Evergreen became a figurine, and Bixlow became petrified. Freed lay battered on the ground, with concern evident on Juvia's face. Gray gradually returned to normal and said it was impossible not to feel the pain, especially since he was hitting his comrades. Meanwhile, the intense battle between Gajeel and Natsu continued. Both Natsu and Gajeel were clearly battered, but neither gave up. Gajeel wondered if he was going to lose to Natsu again. Natsu was worried because his magic was running out, and he still had to face Laxus, Jelal, and Mira-Jane next. Natsu told Gajeel to fall already, but Gajeel remained determined and refused to lose to him. Suddenly, someone stepped in front of Gajeel, and it was Levi. She declared that if Natsu intended to hurt Gajeel further, he would have to fight her instead. Natsu was surprised to see Levi there. Gajeel was annoyed, reminding her that he told her not to come. He said it was impossible for her to win against Salamander, but Levi insisted that it was no longer about winning or losing. It was about fighting for him. Natsu knew everyone is going to get blown away eventually, and so he charged at her. Gajeel tried to stop him, but Levi used the solid script bullet, which Natsu easily brushed off, moving closer to Levi and pointing out her exposed position, startling her. Gajeel angrily shouted for them to stop. Suddenly, Levi clutched her stomach in pain, puzzling Natsu. He remembered a previous conversation where Lucy was shocked to learn that the rumors about Levi's pregnancy were true. Wendy congratulated Levi, who blushed and thanked her, admitting she felt a bit embarrassed. Happy approached and asked if she was really going to lay an egg. Natsu asked if it was his. Levi, shocked, quickly clarified that it wasn't an egg and that it was impossible for Natsu to be the father. She smiled and said she couldn't believe she was going to be a mother. There were many things she was unsure about, but because of this, she felt she could do anything for the child. She vowed to protect them no matter what happened. Despite her small body, her love was immense. Because of that, Natsu stopped his attack. Nonetheless, Levi used that moment to cast a solid script carriage, placing Natsu in a moving vehicle and sending him away. Once Natsu was out of sight, Levi asked Gajeel how he was. He told her that what she did was reckless. He felt disappointed for losing to Natsu again, but Levi reassured him that it was okay. She held his hand and said that for her, Gajeel was the best. He simply smiled and replied, "I see." Back in the left-hand city, Urza and Jalal were already engaged in a fierce battle. As expected, Urza was incredibly strong, said Jalal. She was annoyed by how close Jalal's face was to hers. Even though she attacked repeatedly, Jalal easily dodged each strike. Jalal mentioned that he wanted to see her face up close as if he were teasing her. Urza wondered if the mind control was affecting him differently. In the right-hand city, Wendy and Carla noticed a light emanating from the church. Carla sensed a familiar smell and was shocked to see bodies hanging, which turned out to be Warren, Max, and other guild members. Wendy was curious about the sticky substance surrounding them. Carla warned her not to touch it. They were startled when a lizard-like creature clinging to the ceiling spoke. It exclaimed that they had returned and was excited because he had a new prey. Who could this new enemy be? He seemed excited to see Wendy there. Wendy and Carla were puzzled about who he was and asked if he was responsible for what happened to their guildmates. Warren and the others were visibly struggling in their positions. While upside down, the man remarked that he could smell a dragon. He then spat out a sticky substance and aimed it at Wendy. Fortunately, she managed to dodge it. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was spider thread. He continuously spat out the threads, eventually hitting Wendy and Carla. He wrapped his threads around them, making it difficult for Wendy to move. Carla noted how the threads stuck to her body. Wendy used her Sky Dragon's wing attack to try to escape, but the threads stuck again and returned to her body. The man wrapped them again and hung them from the ceiling. Posing like Spider-Man, he introduced himself as Nebel, the Sticky Dragon. He's part of the Diabolos Wizard Guild. Wendy asked if he was a 5th-generation dragon slayer or a dragon eater. He explained that he came to eat Aldrin, which required breaking the 5 orbs. He also came to break the others as well. Somehow, they were covered in his spider threads. Nebel smiled and approached Wendy, commenting that she smelled like a dragon and that he would eat her. Carla urged Wendy to find a way out, but Wendy couldn't move at all. Meanwhile, in the left-hand city, Kyria, Skarian, and Mad Mole watched the sleeping Aldrin. They remarked that nothing could beat the satisfaction of eating while watching such a massive dragon. He didn't realize that next time, they would be the ones eating him. Mad Mole found the sleeping face of Aldrin cute. Kyria suddenly realized that since they were on the left hand, it meant they could possibly eat the ground. Mad Mole was about to try it, but Skarian stopped him. Skarian warned that Aldrin could read minds. They didn't know what might happen if they moved recklessly before sealing Aldrin's power. Therefore, they needed to destroy the 5 orbs to seal its power first. Kyria laughed, not expecting that others also wanted to destroy those orbs. Even if they left it alone, all the orbs might be destroyed anyway. Mad Mole expressed concern for Nebel and Wraith. Skarian noted that although the objective of others to destroy the orbs could be helpful, it might also become a headache later, so they needed to eliminate them. Kyria agreed that violence might be necessary and mentioned smelling her pet, referring to Urza. Jalal was startled by Urza's outfit. Urza told him to look at her, saying she was now a cat, and then meowed. She understood how his hypnosis worked. He seemed like he's getting high but wasn't immune to women. She posed in front of him, showing her tail. Jalal tried to resist while Urza switched to a bunny outfit, then a swimsuit, and a gothic Lolita look, making Jalal even more uncomfortable. Urza then changed to her seduction armor, and Jalal suddenly jumped on her. Urza became concerned, thinking she might have gone too far. While Jalal was on top of her, about to say something, someone arrived and asked if he was interrupting something. It turned out to be Laxus. Both of them were surprised by his presence, and Urza quickly changed her armor. Laxus asked if he had forgotten their objective, to which he responded that he knew. He said they were just playing, but then Urza wondered if she was the one being played with. Laxus reminded Jalal that their goal was to destroy the 5 orbs in the name of the White Doctrine. Anyone who interfered had to be eliminated. Jalal didn't agree with this, saying that he must at least have Urza, or something like that. Urza was confused by his words. Even if Jalal was an ally of the White Doctrine, he wouldn't let anyone harm Urza. Urza blushed at this. Laxus just laughed, and recalled that they still had unfinished business from before. The 2 men faced off. Laxus smiled while Jalal stared intensely at him. Urza scratched her head, wondering where Jalal's hypnosis was leading him. However, she thought this might be her chance to find an opening in their battle. Suddenly, someone else arrived, claiming to know that Urza was there. Both Laxus and Jalal were surprised. It was Kyria, who greeted Urza with a long time no see. Jalal wondered why another enemy of Urza had appeared, while Laxus was curious about her identity. Kyria licked her lips for smelling a dragon. Urza was utterly confused about what was happening. Back in the right-hand city, the battle between Lucy and the siblings, including Mira Jane, continued. Gray had finally caught the Thunder God tribe and tied them to a tree. Meanwhile, Natsu was still dizzy from the carriage ride. Eventually, someone stopped the carriage and Natsu got out, relieved to have escaped. But someone told him he wasn't saved. Natsu wondered who this person was. He asked if Natsu could hear him or see his form. If so, it meant Natsu was his next meal. He introduced himself as the ghost dragon, Wraith. He thanked Natsu for finding him. Natsu was puzzled about what's with him. Natsu was puzzled when he heard that Wraith was a ghost dragon. He asked if that meant he was a dragon slayer. Could he understand if he mentioned Diabolos? Wraith asked. Natsu thought hard, as he felt he had heard that name before. Wraith said it didn't matter anymore because he was going to eat him. But before that, he wanted to thank Natsu for finding him. Natsu was curious about this, but he apologized since he got no time to deal with him. Natsu realized he still needed to defeat Gajeel, Laxus, Mira Jane, and Jalal. Suddenly, he remembered the Dragon Eaters and their guild, Diabolos. When Wraith raised his hand, he unleashed what looked like white flames, shocking Natsu. But Wraith clarified that those were the souls of people, souls of the dead, crying out. Natsu told him to stop throwing them at him. Natsu went into serious mode again, realizing he needed to return everything to normal as soon as possible. So, Natsu punched Wraith, telling him to get out of his way. But surprisingly, his punch passed right through Wraith's body. Natsu tried again and again, not believing that no matter what he did, it had no effect on Wraith. It seemed impossible. When Wraith uppercut him, it hit him. Annoyed, Natsu retaliated, but still, his attacks missed. Wraith elbowed him back. Natsu wondered why his attacks didn't work, but Wraith's did. It wasn't fair. Suddenly, Happy arrived, calling out to Natsu. He told Happy to get away because that man was too dangerous. Happy wondered who Natsu was referring to. Natsu pointed at Wraith and said it was the man in front of them. Happy was nervous because he saw no one there. He asked Natsu what he was talking about. Happy's face showed fear as he told Natsu not to scare him. There was no one else there but them. So, Natsu looked back at Wraith and thought. Wraith explained that only a few people could see and hear him. Natsu couldn't believe it. Wraith added that he was very grateful Natsu found him. He admitted that he was a ghost. Meanwhile, in the Right Shoulder City Church, Carla told Wendy to find a way to escape. But Wendy replied that she couldn't move. Nebel licked his lips and said he would take her power and eat the wind dragon. Wendy corrected him, saying she wasn't a wind dragon but a sky dragon. Nebel wrapped Wendy in more spider thread until her whole body was covered. Carla screamed in concern for her, but it was too late. Wendy was completely wrapped up and couldn't breathe inside. It was time for Nebel to eat her, but Carla called out to Wendy again. Suddenly, Wendy managed to get one leg out and kicked Nebel in the face. Wendy was pleased with that. She got both legs out, allowing her to walk and move. Next, she freed her right and left hands, tearing away the web covering her face. She could finally breathe properly. This was her chance. Wendy was ready to show her power. But as she tried to run away, she tripped, crying in frustration, while Carla looked worried. Nebel was shocked that his spin-up attack didn't work and that Wendy could move again. Back at the left-hand city church, Kyria, Laxus, Jalal, and Urza faced off. Kyria remarked that Laxus looked delicious. Laxus warned her not to interfere. Jalal threatened that if she was referring to Urza, that made her his enemy as well. Urza wondered why she appeared there. Did she also want to eat Alderon? This meant that other members of Diabolos were also there. Urza thought that both guilds were targeting the orbs. This was a big problem. She looked at the orb and thought it was just the right size to carry. So, while the three fought, she planned to secure the orb. Meanwhile, in the right-hand city park, Loki and Virgo were tied up. Loki apologized, while Virgo even requested to be tied tighter. Lucy was annoyed by what happened. Mira Jane said it was Lucy's turn next. Elfman added that it was time for a manly punishment. Because of this, Lucy closed the gates for Virgo and Loki. She summoned the Golden Bull, Taurus. Taurus was pleased, saying his form was the best. Lucy explained that the power-type spirit was a match for Elfman. For Mira Jane, she called upon Gemini. She instructed Gemini to become Lysana, which shocked Mira Jane. Lucy knew that her youngest sister was Mira Jane's weakness. Even though Mira Jane knew it was just a fake Lysana in front of her, she couldn't bring herself to attack. Suddenly, Gemini reverted to their normal twin form, surprising both Lucy and Mira Jane. They realized this was the doing of Mad Mole and Scarian. Finally, they met again. Wherever there was a dragon, Fairy Tale was always there, Scarian said. Lucy was shocked to see and recognize them as members of Diabolos. Hearing this, Mira Jane transformed again, surprising Lucy. She asked if they were responsible for the disappearance of her sister, Lysana. Mira Jane was ready to fight for her sister, and the Diabolos members were prepared as well. Lucy warned Mira Jane, but she suddenly attacked. Scarian and Mad Mole faced her, and she was thrown back but still managed to land properly. Elfman was furious about this. He punched Mad Mole but was shocked by his toughness. Mad Mole explained that he was the armor dragon. Meanwhile, Scarian used his ash form to easily combat Mira Jane. Scarian floated in the air while Mira Jane tumbled to dodge his ash. Surprisingly, he managed to turn the ground into ash. Lucy didn't expect this, but Mira Jane wasn't deterred. She continued targeting Scarian, even though it was difficult because he kept turning into ash. Scarian clarified that her attacks wouldn't work against his ash form. Nevertheless, Mira Jane unleashed a powerful attack, causing a big explosion. However, it was still no match for Scarian, who managed to escape and kick her back, causing her to fall. Lucy was worried for her, but suddenly, something wrapped around her leg like a snake. It turned out to be Lysana, who said she finally caught Lucy. Mira Jane called out to her. This was Lysana's animal soul, snake form. Lysana admitted she didn't like that form herself. Lucy thought to herself that she didn't have time for this, but they were too strong for her to match. Lysana circled around her, saying there were two ways to deal with those who disobeyed the White Doctrine. The first was execution, a decision requiring courage for someone who had been with them for years. Lucy struggled to breathe because of her. The second way was to turn them white, making them allies. Lysana preferred the second way, so she grabbed Lucy's face and made her look into her eyes, intending to turn her white as well. They locked eyes, and Lysana said it was perfect. They would both become white together. Back at the left city church, Kyria kicked Laxus, but he easily knocked her down. Kyria then used the Blade Dragon's rending roar. Laxus was surprised because it managed to slice through the surroundings. Jalal stayed on guard. Kyria said there was nothing she couldn't cut. Meanwhile, Urza thought it was her chance. As she tried to move her leg, Jalal used Bind Snake on her, catching her off guard. Urza recognized the attack, and Jalal said he had stolen her body's freedom, lifting her up and saying they would leave together. Urza asked where they were going. Jalal blushed and said they would both become white. Urza reminded him that their objective was to destroy the orbs. Jalal thought about it and agreed. But then he looked at her and said it was more important for her to be dyed white now. Urza was frustrated because she couldn't move. Jalal was delighted as he carried her out. In the right city residential area, Natsu still couldn't believe he was facing a ghost. He asked if Wraith was dead. Wraith confirmed it. Happy, sweating nervously, asked who Natsu was talking to. Natsu picked him up and put his face close to Wraith's. Happy was puzzled by this. Natsu said he was showing him the ghost and asked again if he really couldn't see it. Happy insisted he couldn't and was scared. He said that if there really was a ghost there, he would be cursed. Natsu wondered if he was the only one who could see the ghost. Wraith explained that only dragon slayers could see him, which is why he joined Diabolos. If he was a ghost, why did he feel hungry? Natsu asked. Wraith clarified that it wasn't hunger. He just wanted to gain power, which he could do by consuming dragons. Finally, it sank in for Happy that Natsu was indeed talking to someone. Natsu wasn't sure if he was saying the right thing, but he told Wraith, "Go rest in peace." Wraith replied that it was impossible until he found the person who took his life. Until that moment came, he needed to grow stronger. Suddenly, he used the dragon spirit, causing the ground beneath Natsu to shatter. Natsu screamed. Happy was curious about where the white flames came from. Wraith explained again that those weren't flames but souls. However, he realized Happy couldn't hear him. Natsu seemed to struggle as Wraith said the souls were crying. A strong explosion occurred, and Happy worried for Natsu as he collapsed. It seemed impossible. Wraith pulled Natsu's soul and declared that it, along with Natsu's power, was now his. Happy couldn't believe that Natsu had been defeated by the enemy. He wondered where this enemy was. Wraith replied that others couldn't see or hear him. He gazed at Natsu's soul and said it was time to consume that soul of flame. Happy approached Natsu's body and cried, desperately trying to wake him, but Natsu didn't move. So, Happy screamed, "Natsu!" Wraith declared that Natsu was dead. A new scene was shown, where Natsu was lying on a cloud. He woke up and looked around, wondering what this place was. Why did the ground seem like clouds? He jumped around, enjoying the place, but then he remembered what had happened. A man appeared before him and said he had fought a ghost. He greeted him and said they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Natsu was shocked to see that it was Zirif. Confused, he asked what was happening. Zirif noted that Natsu seemed to think he should be dead. Indeed, Zirif said, he had died because he was freed from the curse of immortality. Natsu still didn't understand what was happening, so Zirif explained that he was in the place where the dead meet. Natsu wondered if this was hell. Zirif was surprised that Natsu didn't think of heaven. Natsu explained that because Zirif was there, he thought of hell. Zirif clarified that this place was neither heaven nor hell, but something similar. Since Natsu was there, he wondered if he had died. He said that Natsu was close to death, but not quite there. Natsu was frustrated with that description. Zirif said it was difficult to express. Another voice said it was true that this world was where the dead gathered. Natsu looked at the newcomer. The woman added that sometimes those whose deaths are not yet determined end up there, like Natsu. It was then revealed to be Mavis. Natsu hugged her, crying, and called her his first master. Natsu wondered if she was alive, but she replied that she was also dead. Zirif then warned Natsu not to cling to his wife. Natsu was surprised to hear that she was Zirif's wife, which Mavis confirmed. 2 children were with Mavis, and she introduced them as August and Larcade. She told them to say hello, and they politely greeted Natsu, calling him uncle. Natsu's eyes widened at this. He couldn't believe it when they said those were their children. Mavis admitted that the 2 were quite pampered. They could see their house in that place. While Mavis played with her children, Natsu and Zirif watched from afar. Zirif admitted that when they were alive, he had done many terrible things to Natsu. Therefore, he had mixed feelings about the happy life he had in that world. But he knew that Natsu would forgive him because he was a good person. However, even if Natsu forgave him, the people who died or suffered because of him might not be able to. Zirif said it was okay. After all, that place wasn't where he would be judged for his sins. Natsu responded that he had no idea what Zirif was talking about. Zirif reiterated that it wasn't heaven or hell. It wasn't the afterlife or the realm of the dead. It was Natsu's mental heaven, and they might as well call it beta heaven. It was the image of heaven in his unconscious mind. Therefore, everyone had different beta heavens. Zirif wasn't sure where their actual souls were. He was curious if they lived in their beta heaven like that, or if they were gone. Natsu asked if that was his image of heaven, and Zirif confirmed it. Natsu commented that it was weird. The heaven he imagined was full of fire and dragons. Zirif commented that it sounded more like hell. Natsu was shocked when a dragon suddenly interrupted their conversation, claiming to be there as well. Natsu couldn't believe it when he saw Igneel there. Igneel said that this world was his unconscious mind. Natsu couldn't help but tear up. In his heart, Zirif, Mavis, and Igneel were living peacefully there. Furthermore, Atlas Flame and Zircones were also there, as well as Lucy's parents and other friends who had died in battle. Even Acnologia was there. Natsu sobbed. Igneel praised him, saying he was a truly kind child, which was why he was so strong. Zirif then said it was time for Natsu to leave. Mavis added that he always managed to turn a bad situation into a good one. Natsu, concerned, mentioned that his enemy was a ghost, so his attacks weren't effective. Igneel questioned what he meant. Igneel pointed out that Natsu was also like a ghost now. Natsu pondered this. Zirif explained that when Natsu returned to his world, he might forget everything that happened there. This was inevitable because it was the world of his unconscious mind, Mavis added. However, Igneel assured him that even if he couldn't remember them, they would always be in his heart. Natsu thanked Igneel and his first master and their children. He then told Zirif to make sure he got along with Mavis, calling him Big Bro. He encouraged him to continue living. Back with Wraith, just before he could consume Natsu, Natsu's spirit managed to bite Wraith's fingers. Natsu refused to let his soul be eaten so easily and even punched Wraith in the face, much to Wraith's surprise. Looking back at his fallen body, Wraith saw Happy still trying to wake Natsu. Wraith wondered what was happening. Natsu saw his own battered body and couldn't believe it. Wraith thought it was thought projection. Natsu, despite not fully understanding what was happening, was thrilled that he had somehow become a ghost too. As he contemplated returning to his body, he realized that now, as both were ghosts, his attacks would finally work. He punched Wraith hard in the face, and it finally connected. Natsu vaguely remembered that someone had taught him how to use thought projection magic. Wraith couldn't believe that Natsu managed to come back as a thought projection. This meant that Natsu could now attack him. Delighted, Natsu realized that his punches were finally having an effect. He decided to relieve his stress on Wraith by blowing him away. It worked because Wraith admitted that Natsu was the first person he'd seen capable of doing that. However, Wraith wasn't going to be defeated easily. He chose to possess Happy, which shocked Natsu. Wraith explained that he could possess a human body, or in this case, a cat's body. Natsu shouted no, insisting that Wraith wouldn't win by possessing Happy. Wraith retorted that it would be impossible for Natsu to attack his friend. Natsu thought quickly and then apologized to Happy, smiling before punching him. He then told Wraith he can. Wraith didn't expect Natsu to attack his friend's body, so he left Happy. When Happy woke up, he cried, saying his cheek hurt so much. Wraith couldn't believe there were trash owners like Natsu who abused their pets in that world. Natsu, confused, asked what he was talking about. Happy was his friend. They always argued and fought, but if a weirdo possessed him, Natsu would punch him to drive them away. He wouldn't forgive anyone who hurt Happy. Even if it was you who hit him? Wraith asked. He called him an irrational person. Natsu proudly admitted it, then delivered a powerful kick. As Wraith was thrown back, he realized that Natsu's power was comparable to Madmole's. Natsu was incredibly strong. Wraith decided he had to withdraw for now. He couldn't win unless he could possess a stronger person. Natsu couldn't accept that Wraith was running away. He tried to stop him but noticed Happy crying on the side. Happy's face hurt so much, and with Natsu still unconscious, he didn't know what to do. Then Natsu's soul approached him. Natsu tried to return to his own body to talk to Happy. He told Happy not to worry. He would go back to being a ghost to fight the ghost guy, but he would return. Meanwhile, Happy should watch over his body. Happy was shocked and confused as Natsu's soul left again. While fleeing, Wraith thought that having a strong body wasn't enough. He needed someone who could synchronize with him. The higher the synchro rate, the more power he could access, and it would multiply his power. Natsu figured that if Wraith could pass through buildings, maybe he could too. He tried it on a wall and was thrilled when he succeeded. He even passed through a bathhouse, pleased that he wasn't destroying anything. Because of that, he wouldn't get scolded by Gramps, their master. Wraith explained that there were 3 conditions to increase the synchro rate. First, find someone with equal or stronger magic. Second, the person must have seen the abyss of death. Third, the person should be a relative. Since he had no family, he couldn't fulfill the 3rd condition. So, he just needed someone who met the first 2 conditions. He was confident there was someone in the big town who fit the criteria. Finally, he found someone. Natsu chased after Wraith and wondered where he had gone when he suddenly disappeared. Then, someone in a wheelchair appeared. Wraith said that this body had an impressive synchro rate. Natsu couldn't believe that Wraith chose Master Makarov. He asked if Wraith had possessed his body. Makarov hadn't been able to use his legs since the war with Alvarez. Wraith was delighted by Makarov's overflowing magic power and the fact that he had seen the abyss of death. Due to that, his own power multiplied in Master Makarov's body. As a result, he gained unparalleled magic power. Meanwhile, Mira-Jane and Elfman admitted that their enemies were too strong. Skarian stated that their attacks wouldn't work on Ashes and wouldn't be effective against Madmole's armor. Lysana was still wrapped around Lucy and told her to join them in the White Doctrine. Lucy was confused, feeling like her mind was blanking out, similar to when Kana forced her to drink alcohol. Suddenly, Lucy woke up and used the Capricorn form, surprising Lysana. Lucy said she almost had her. That magic came from the eyes, and Lysana realized the sunglasses Lucy was wearing. Lucy apologized to her. For now, she needed Lysana to pass out, so Capricorn put her in a headlock. Lucy thanked Capricorn for his help. He replied it was nothing and praised Lucy's quick thinking. The Fairy Tail members and Diabolos were still facing off. Lucy then said they'll leave Mira-Jane and Elfman to handle the Diabolos members. She needed to go. Capricorn asked where she was going, and she said she had a plan to save everyone and needed to find Kana first. Back at the left-hand city church, Kyria, lying on the ground, couldn't believe there was someone as strong as Laxus. Laxus asked if she still wanted to continue. Kyria smiled and said his strength was impressive. She wondered how she could cut him down. In the next scene, we return to the right shoulder church, where Wendy is still trapped in a cocoon but able to move. Nebaru wondered why she could still move. Carla, stuck to Nebaru's webs, was worried, and Nebaru asked what kind of dragon Wendy was. Wendy explained that she was the Sky Dragon, a Sky Dragon Slayer, but Neberg corrected her, saying she was the Cocoon Dragon. Neberg found her appearance cute, calling him Cuckoo, irritating Wendy, who insisted she was Wendy. Nebaru attacked again with his sticky webs, but Wendy easily dodged by rolling on the ground. Nebaru was shocked, and Carla was also stunned by what she saw. Wendy continued to roll and then leaped, using Sky Dragon's claw to land a solid kick on Nebaru's head, knocking him down. Just when Wendy thought she had defeated him, Neberv quickly recovered by shooting a web to the core and pulling himself back up. Nebaru held the core, remarking that Wendy was interesting and he wouldn't eat her yet. Wendy was shocked as Nebaru suddenly changed his target, deciding to complete their goal instead. Wendy and Carla were caught off guard, and Nebaru quickly shattered the orb, causing Wendy to look worried and anxious. The right-hand city shook after Nebaru broke the orb, frightening the residents. The white mage walked through the city, commenting that with 3 orbs left, with dragon god Aldebaran would lose his power. Laxus and Kyria also felt the city's tremor. Kyria asked why this was happening, and Laxus explained that an orb had been broken, leaving only 3, with 1 in their possession. Kyria stared at Laxus, asking what they planned to do by weakening Aldebaran. Laxus said they intended to white out Aldebaran to fight the other dragon gods. The White Wizard's plan was to steal the Wood Dragon God's power. Kyria understood, saying they were weakening Aldebaran to consume him. Despite their different objectives, their means were the same, and Laxus agreed. Kyria then questioned why they were fighting in front of the orb, and Laxus pointed out that she had started it. Kyria laughed, agreeing, and said she did it because Laxus looked delicious and seemed perfect as an appetizer. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Urza thought it was time to act and take the orb, but found herself sealed to the side of a tree, unable to move. Jalal had bound her hands and feet, approaching her face, causing her to blush. Jalal said it was time to make Urza white, prompting her to shout that he was too close. Jalal held her chin and said she had nothing to fear, making Urza blush even more as she told him to stop. Jalal asked Urza to trust him completely, but Urza requested he undo the bindings as they brought back some memories. Jalal remembered the times they were enslaved, and Urza added that she wanted to put her hands on Jalal's shoulders and touch his cheek. Moved by this, Jalal decided to remove the bindings. He apologized, saying he wouldn't do it again, while Urza slowly removed the bondage covering her chest, causing Jalal to look and be surprised. Urza then wrapped the bondage around Jalal, saying it was his turn to be bound. Jalal misunderstood, thinking Urza wanted foreplay, and said she could come closer as he was ready, causing Urza to blush deeply and correct him. Urza quickly transformed into her armor and, blushing, told Jalal to stay as he was while walking away. Jalal, meanwhile, thought Urza was teasing him. Urza exclaimed that she needed to hurry back to the church, and then we shift to Natsu's confrontation with Wraith, who was now possessing Makarov. Natsu suddenly realized that he had never fought Makarov seriously. Wraith explained that Natsu shouldn't think of his master as just an acquaintance because Makarov's magic, combined with his own, had created unrivaled power. Wraith punched with Makarov's power, landing a solid hit on Natsu that sent him crashing hard into the wall. Natsu was hurt and remarked that just a moment ago, he could phase through walls. He noticed something and asked Wraith how he managed to land a hit despite being a ghost, even though Natsu couldn't attack him with his real body. Wraith pointed out that they were on different levels. He explained that while he was a ghost, Natsu was strictly speaking a thought projection, so whether his attacks hit a solid object or not depended on his point of view. Natsu didn't quite understand but thought it sounded unfair. Wraith disagreed and explained that it was the same situation for Natsu. By nature, an ethereal body couldn't hold anything, but Natsu managed to hit when he possessed Happy, so he could also hit Makarov if he wanted to. Natsu admitted he didn't quite get whether being a ghost was helpful or not. Then, Wraith asked who he had possessed because it was a synchro rate he had never experienced before. Natsu explained that the old man was the master of his guild, which made Wraith realize where that extraordinary magic came from. He added that judging by Makarov's age, he might have seen the abyss of death in all his experiences. Despite all that, their synchro rate was extremely high, and Wraith suddenly realized that this meant the old man had also fulfilled the third condition. Wraith wondered if Makarov was a blood relative, and what their relationship might be. Wraith seemed stunned by the thought that he might be related to Makarov, while Natsu was furious at him for possessing both Happy and his master. In Wraith's mind, he admitted that he had no memories from when he was alive. That's why he needed to find the person who killed him and retrieve his memories by judging that person. As he thought about this, Natsu suddenly shouted that his friends were not vessels. Wraith continued to ponder if there was anyone who considered him a friend before. He quickly brushed off the thought and decided to focus on what he was doing now. He controlled Makarov again, sending a punch towards Natsu, who was sent flying. Wraith was delighted by Makarov's extraordinary strength and followed up with another powerful left straight punch towards Natsu, causing buildings to collapse. Natsu managed to block the punch and commented that, as expected, his master was strong. However, he said that the real Makarov was even stronger as he unleashed a barrage of flames. Makarov's fist was burned, and Natsu followed up with another attack, apologizing as he did so. He used the Fire Dragon King's Demolition Fist, which sent Makarov flying across the city. As Makarov flew, Wraith couldn't believe that Natsu managed to overcome such a high level of magic. He realized that no matter how powerful the magic, the body's age was a severe limitation. Wraith then saw Makarov's past when he was younger, talking with some men. Makarov told one of the men to stop talking like an old man. It turned out he was speaking to Yajima, Goldmine, Bob, and Rob when they were younger. Yajima said he was tired of such fights, and Goldmine quipped that it was because he was weak, prompting Rob to scold Goldmine. Yajima added that he wanted to leave the guild as soon as possible and perhaps become a counselor, prompting Goldmine to ask that of all things, why he would want to become an enemy. Bob said he was also thinking of leaving the guild, making Rob sigh with a smile. Makarov irritably asked Bob if he really planned to leave Fairy Tail, while Poorly Yusuka commented that it was fine because the guild already had too many members. Makarov got angry and asked why Poorly Yusuka was in the guild if she had no magic. Poorly Yusuka retorted, pointing out the times he was saved by her medicine. Goldmine joked that they should stop fighting like a married couple, and Rob said they suited each other well. Both Makarov and Poorly Yusuka blushed and shouted that they weren't a couple. Poorly Yusuka embarrassedly added that no one would want to marry someone like him. Rob pointed out they were blushing, and Yajima suggested they get married. Makarov shouted at them to stop teasing, while Poorly Yusuka screamed that this was why she hated humans. Suddenly, people rushed into the guild carrying someone on a stretcher. It caught their attention, and they asked what had happened. The newcomers said someone was injured, attacked by monsters while working. One of the guys who carried him begged them to help him, and she quickly approached. The victim was severely wounded, and Poorly Yusuka looked deeply worried. It turned out that the injured man was Wraith. He weakly said it seemed like he wouldn't make it. Wraith was shocked by the memory, and in it, Makarov urged him to keep fighting, saying Poorly Yusuka would save him. However, Poorly Yusuka seemed unable to do anything in that situation, and Makarov desperately begged her to save Wraith. Weakly, Wraith asked Makarov why he was so desperate and if they were that close. Makarov replied that it didn't matter because they were friends. Wraith smiled and said that Makarov was right, while Makarov screamed for him not to die. Wraith didn't expect Makarov to know his name, and soon Makarov, in tears, said what was he talking about. They were both friends of Fairy Tail. The sorrow was visible on their companions' faces as they watched the scene. Eventually, Makarov broke down, sobbing, saying that Wraith was family to all of them. Despite this, Wraith lost his life, leaving Makarov to cry out in grief. Afterward, Wraith realized that he had been a wizard in Fairy Tail. It was because of the guild's bonds, stronger than blood, that their synchro rate was so high. Back in the present, Wraith had just been sent flying by Natsu's punch. When Makarov's body lost consciousness, Wraith decided to leave his body, admitting defeat. Natsu was puzzled, so Wraith explained that he remembered everything and couldn't consider them enemies anymore because Natsu and the others were family too. Wraith's body gradually started to fade, and Natsu noticed this. Wraith said he could finally return and thanked Natsu for finding him. Makarov suddenly spoke, calling out to Wraith, who turned around. Makarov said he missed him, and Wraith felt the same. Eventually, Wraith completely disappeared, leaving Natsu scratching his head, trying to understand what had happened. Makarov closed his eyes again, and Natsu let it be, knowing he had defeated his master and that he was now back in his own body. Happy cried tears of relief upon seeing him alive. In the next scene, we return to Gray and Juvia, where they have just defeated Freed, Bixlow, and Evergreen. They also felt the tremor, prompting Juvia to explain that another orb might have been broken, which made Gray realize that they don't have any more time to stay there. Suddenly, someone spoke up and contradicted his thought, suggesting that they should stay longer. When they turned around, they saw Kana, who was already drunk, much to Gray's astonishment since she was still drinking despite being controlled. Gray felt somewhat relieved, thinking that compared to the Thunder Legion, Kana would be an easier opponent. Juvia, however, warned him to be careful. Gray apologized in advance and prepared to punch Kana, intending to knock her out, but to his surprise, she easily dodged his attack, so he got irritated, calling her a drunkard. Kana grinned and suddenly used fairy glitter against Gray, causing both Gray and Juvia to panic as they were still in the middle of town. However, before Kana could finish casting fairy glitter, a fluffy substance hit her, stopping her in her tracks. Gray was left speechless, realizing it was Lucy who had arrived just in time, transformed into her Aries suit. Lucy explained that the special trait of Aries is fluffiness, and using it, they can block magic that requires chanting. Juvia was delighted to see Lucy, while Gray was puzzled about what she meant by fluffiness. Lucy mentioned that she was looking for Kana, to which Gray commended her for her good timing. It was the unique power of Plu, a nose as sharp as Natsu's. Juvia and Gray were left speechless, wondering if she was referring to the drill-like thing on Plu's face. Kana appeared dazed, and Lucy approached her, searching for something on her body, leaving Gray puzzled. Juvia whispered to Gray, suggesting that Lucy might be taking advantage of Kana's confusion to touch her melons, and even offered Gray a chance to take advantage of the situation, causing Gray to blush and deny the suggestion. Eventually, Lucy found what she was looking for, Kana's magic cards. Gray and Juvia were surprised and asked if those were the cards Kana always used, to which Lucy confirmed, explaining that those cards have the power to seal people. Gray recalled instances when Kana used those cards to seal people. Using them, they could gather and protect everyone at the same time, Lucy explained. Gray questioned whether it was Kana's magic, but Lucy pointed out that they were both holder-type wizards, and although she wasn't as skilled as Kana with the cards, she believed she could still use them. Unlike celestial spirit keys, the cards didn't require a contract. Juvia cheerfully asked if that meant they could return everyone to normal, to which Lucy responded that whether they could turn them back or not was another thing, but at least they could protect them. With that, Lucy decided to imprison Kana inside the card she was holding. However, instead of Kana, Lucy herself was imprisoned inside the card, shocking Gray and Juvia. Lucy was puzzled about what had happened, while Gray said he had no idea. Lucy speculated that it might be a counterspell Kana had set up to prevent misuse of her magic, but Kana, who had now stood up, corrected her. Kana explained that although the cards were store-bought and anyone could use them, there was a trick to using the magic to imprison people. Kana quickly restored Lucy, surprising everyone, and then imprisoned Freed, Bixlow, and Evergreen inside the cards. Juvia asked why she did that, while Lucy thought that the hypnosis effect had worn off. Gray pointed out that it couldn't have been hypnosis alone because Kana shouldn't have been able to use magic even without it. Kana seemed confused when she heard about the hypnosis and noticed her clothes, questioning why she was dressed that way. As Kana walked around, she realized she was stark naked underneath the clothes, prompting Juvia to glare at Gray, ensuring he didn't look at Kana. Lucy, puzzled, asked if that meant Kana hadn't been controlled from the beginning because she was drunk. Gray and Juvia, equally confused, wondered about the fairy glitter from earlier, suspecting it might have been due to Kana's extreme drunkenness. Kana, looking bewildered, was suddenly hugged by Lucy, who expressed her relief and happiness. Kana brushed it off, asking what was really going on. Gray then said that with this, they might be able to save everyone, to which Juvia quickly invited them to go and find their friends. Meanwhile, at the left-hand church, the face-off between Kiria and Laxus continued. Kiria remarked that it was time to eat, calling Laxus the lightning dragon. Laxus responded that he didn't know who she was, but he understood her power now and believed she couldn't defeat him. Kiria, preparing to attack, questioned his certainty and unleashed a slash attack, declaring that she had already killed Laxus's strength and would now make him her pet. However, her attack seemed ineffective as Laxus stared at her with fierce eyes, shocking her. Laxus, ready to strike, explained that he didn't have the strength Kiria mentioned. He said he was part of the guild because he was weak, but he didn't think that was a bad thing. He then used roaring thunder on Kiria, hitting her solidly and sending her flying. Smiling, Laxus explained that it's okay to be weak in front of your friends and not push yourself too far. He added that Urza might find that part tricky. As she fell, Kiria thought about how strong her opponent was but noted his weak heart. Because of that, she thought her heart might have fallen for him. While that was happening, we switched to the right shoulder city church, where Wendy was panicking because she couldn't free Carla from the webs. Carla reassured her, telling her to go after that brute instead. As Wendy tried to reason, Carla explained that Nebaru was likely heading to other towns to destroy their orbs, so Wendy needed to stop him. Reluctantly, Wendy forced herself to leave Carla, while Carla shouted that if she beat him, she can remove her cocoon. Wendy then assured her that she'll come back after. As Wendy left the church, she saw Nebaru running on the roof. She quickly used her Sky Dragon's breath to propel herself and catch up to Nebaru. Nebaru was surprised by her sudden appearance and got kicked in the face by Wendy, which sent him flying. However, Nebaru managed to stop himself by sticking to two opposing buildings. Hanging there, Nebaru commented on how amusing it was that Wendy returned despite being released, calling her a dumb coup. Wendy declared she had come back to stop him and charged at him, ready to attack. Nebaru prepared himself, pulling out some gumballs and eating them, surprising Wendy. Nebaru explained that now that he had eaten the bubble gum, his power-up was complete. Nebaru then attacked Wendy with what seemed like a breath attack, a sticky dragon variant, hitting her solidly. He menacingly told her that now he would eat her. The scene shifts to Kana, Lucy, Gray, and Juvia, who had managed to place Macau, Wakaba, and Romeo into the cards. Gray noticed from their injuries that Natsu was likely the one who had defeated them. Lucy was searching for someone and eventually found Lisana, placing her in a card as well. Gray suddenly sensed a magic power, and Lucy explained that Mira and Elfman, along with some Diabolos members, were close by. Gray commented that it would be a hassle since they would have to fight them. Juvia suggested putting them all in the cards, but Kana explained that it wouldn't work on people with strong hostility. They had to be defeated first. Lucy said they needed to think, because there must be another way. Meanwhile, at the left-hand city church, Kiria lay badly injured, and Laxus approached the city's orb. Laxus recalled that the white mage had ordered him to destroy the orbs. Just as he was about to touch the orb, Urza arrived, shouting for him to stop. Urza noticed Kiria lying defeated and thought that Laxus is indeed very strong to have beaten such a formidable opponent. Urza thought that as long as Laxus is under the White Wizard's control, she wouldn't find any opening. Considered that he had a better chance if Gray and Natsu were there. Laxus released an aura and told Urza to move out of his way. Urza quickly transformed into another armor, determined to stop Laxus no matter what. Meanwhile, Natsu and Happy were flying back to the city, with Happy asking why they were returning. Natsu explained that out of the 5 cities, the one on the back was in the center. Happy asked what about it, and Natsu said that usually, The strongest enemies were in the center, which surprised Happy. Natsu was sure Laxus or Mira was there, while Happy was surprised by his deduction. Natsu added that he didn't care much about Jalal, and speaking of Jalal, we see him still tied up, wondering how long Urza would tease him. Natsu and Happy saw a pillar of light coming from the church and headed there, hoping it was where another orb was located. Inside, as they entered, Natsu seemed shocked by what he saw. It appeared that the white mage was there, seemingly asleep. Natsu was baffled as to why she was unconscious in such a place. When he looked for the orb, Happy felt relieved to see it was safe. Natsu was confused about what was happening, while Happy suggested it might be a good time to beat her up. Natsu questioned if he meant beating up an unconscious woman, leaving Happy speechless and unsure. Nonetheless, Natsu grabbed the white wizard by the collar and prepared to punch her with his fire fist. Gathering his courage, Natsu declared that it didn't matter if she was asleep or a woman because she was an enemy of their guild. If it was for the guild, he would do whatever he needed to do. Suddenly, the white wizard woke up, weakly called his name, and grabbed his attention along with Happy's. She suddenly hugged him and pleaded for him to save her. On the other hand, Lucy was thinking about what to do, and Juvia noticed that Gray was getting restless, saying that nothing would happen if they just stayed on the sidelines. He said he would help Mira and Elfman, but Kana stopped him, saying that they were seen as enemies and it might be bad for them. Juvia agreed. Gray disagreed, explaining that they first needed to defeat Skarian and Madmol. Lucy asked how they could do that, and if Mira would just get in the way. Gray thought he could wrap them in ice, but Kana doubted it would work on Mira and reminded him it didn't work on Skarian. Frustrated, Gray had no more suggestions, so Juvia calmed them and said they needed to think first. They needed to defeat the Diabolos and secure Mira's group. Kana explained that Mira, the she-devil Mira Jane, would surely win because she was powerful. Juvia agreed, saying there was no way Mira would lose, and Gray also agreed, since they were talking about Mira. Kana shouted for them to believe in her power, and Lucy added not to forget about Elfman. It would be good if Mira's group won, and if that happened, they could manage things later. Kana and Juvia added that they needed to plan their strategy against the White Mage, who single-handedly took down their entire guild. Kana pointed out that the White Mage seemed to have something for Natsu, looking teasingly at Lucy. Juvia clarified it was the White Mage's Toka personality, which made it more urgent for them to hurry, as she was Lucy's love rival. Lucy blushed and scratched her face, feeling a bit sorry for Toka, knowing that Natsu had no interest in such things. In the next scene, we return to the church where Natsu, Happy, and Toka were. Natsu wondered why she was hugging him, and Toka quickly let go and apologized. Natsu asked if they had met before, to which Toka shyly replied it was a misunderstanding. When Toka noticed Natsu's appearance, she was surprised and looked at Happy. Toka blushed while looking at Happy, making him wonder, but soon she hugged him, calling him Natsu. This puzzled Happy, and Natsu said it was a big misunderstanding. Toka explained that she had been wanting to meet Natsu, and started telling how a year ago, he saved her from bandits. Naturally, she understood if he didn't remember. Happy and Natsu were speechless as she explained, so she added that she was trapped in a barrel in northern Fiori, shouting for help when she saw a prince riding a fire dragon through a hole. Happy commented that he was just carrying Natsu then. She continued, saying he defeated the bandits one by one in a flash, to which Happy pointed out that Natsu did that. Toka agreed and said Natsu was her prince, but Happy clarified that he wasn't Natsu. Toka was confused, remembering how she heard of the name Natsu after seeing Happy's face. Since then, she thought Happy was Natsu. They both clarified it was just a misunderstanding, and soon Toka understood the correct identities of each one. They apologized, saying they didn't remember the incident, and it turned out that Toka was there when they returned the luggage to the client afterward. Toka's attitude towards Happy didn't change, as she was still happy to meet her prince. However, she suddenly kneeled and deeply apologized for misunderstanding the name of her beloved, calling it the second biggest mistake she had made. Because of that, Happy felt weirded out and said so it was not the first place. Toka explained that her biggest mistake was definitely how she had let her body be controlled by the White Wizard. Happy shouted that it was happening right now. Suddenly, a tail appeared behind Toka, surprising both of them. She said she could now return to her true form, revealing that she was also an Exceed. They were both shocked while Toka declared that this was her true self. Happy found her cute, while Natsu exclaimed that she was a cat. Toka explained that she only appeared as a human when the white mage controlled her, and Happy seemed attracted to her as he listened. Natsu, taken aback by Happy's flirtation, pointed out, "What about Carla?" Happy, standing firm, asked, "Who is that?" And Carla sneezed because they were talking about her. Natsu changed the topic, asking why Toka was there and what happened to the white mage. Toka remembered their situation and hurried them. Meanwhile, at the left-hand city church, the showdown between Urza and Laxus was about to begin. The two stared intensely at each other, and in an instant, Urza lunged forward with a thrust, but Laxus dodged and countered with a left hook that solidly hit Urza's side. Urza felt the pain of Laxus's attack, unable to believe that her anti-lightning armor was shattered with just one hit. Laxus followed up with a lightning dragon's roar, sending Urza flying. As she was pushed back, Urza decided that protection was pointless. She quickly requipped and used the Dragon Slayer seal, release, True Benizakura. Laxus's eyes glinted, and he grinned, saying that if Urza was going to show a Dragon Slayer weapon, he would show her his new move. Urza was surprised by his words, and Laxus explained that to defeat him, small attacks wouldn't work. As Urza stared at him, Laxus prepared himself and unleashed an extraordinary aura made of electricity, forcing Urza to heighten her focus. Gradually, the color of his lightning changed, and soon he reached his red lightning dragon mode. Urza was stunned by this, and Laxus explained that it was a power he obtained by chance while fighting in Alvarez, and now it belonged to him. Laxus controlled his red lightning to attack Urza, but she managed to dodge it. However, as she dodged, Laxus quickly followed her and managed to punch her in the side again. She was thrown back and felt the red lightning throughout her body. Urza rolled on the ground but quickly got up, yet Laxus appeared behind her with incredible speed. Fortunately, Urza predicted his move and kicked him in the face, but it had no effect, and she only got electrocuted. Laxus slammed her to the ground, causing destruction, and followed up with a powerful kick that sent her flying again. Urza couldn't believe the power of her opponent, but despite that, she swiftly counterattacked with quick slashes as soon as she landed, hitting Laxus's left shoulder and arm. Finally, her attack worked against this powerful opponent, and they clashed their arms, but Laxus's strength overwhelmed her. He struck her head, making her kneel on the ground, and the impact shattered the area they stood on. Urza thought about how strong Laxus had become during those times, and when Laxus followed up with a red lightning punch while she was on the ground, she dodged it by tumbling away. However, as soon as she landed, Laxus's red lightning crawled towards her and still hit her. Meanwhile, Kiria regained consciousness and noticed that Laxus and Urza were from the same guild. She was stunned and commented on how fierce they both were. Urza suddenly drew another katana and concentrated, catching the attention of both Laxus and Kiria. Urza explained that Wendy had taught her high enchant, and she immediately used it. She simultaneously enchanted her two katanas, one with Fire Dragon's flames and the other with Ice Demon's cold air. Laxus noticed that Urza had enchanted her swords with Natsu's flames and Gray's ice, and he commented on how meticulous it was. Urza silently asked Natsu and Gray to lend her their power, and she swiftly attacked with her fire and ice swords. Laxus was taken aback, and the attack hit him solidly, dealing fire and ice damage. Kiria's eyes widened at what she saw, but Laxus appeared to be fine, surprising Urza. Laxus touched his blood and explained that the red of that blood was what gave the power of the red lightning. The windows shattered from the power of his aura, and red lightning rained down on Urza's body. Laxus smiled at this turn of events, but despite the extraordinary power, Urza managed to stand, commenting that it was stronger than she thought and calling Laxus the Red Lightning Dragon. Laxus asked her how long she would hold back because it was no longer a quarrel between friends, and Urza agreed, saying she was just getting warmed up. Meanwhile, on the side, Kiria couldn't believe the monstrous strength of these two. The punches continued to fly as Laxus and Urza clashed, their intense battle leaving Kiria wide-eyed in astonishment at the display of power she was witnessing. Both fighters unleashed a barrage of attacks, and when they struck each other simultaneously, Laxus quickly recovered and used Lightning Dragon Heaven Ward Halberd against Urza. Fortunately, Urza rolled to dodge the attack and countered by re-equipping to Heaven's Wheel Blumenblatt, launching a multitude of swords. In response, Laxus countered her attack with Reiko Red Lightning, causing a massive explosion in the area. The church where they fought began to crumble from the sheer intensity of their battle, and the determination to win was evident on their faces. Even Kiria was knocked back by the force of their attacks and aura, feeling unlucky to be caught up just by watching. Both fighters paused to catch their breath, exhaustion clear on their faces. Urza switched to her no-armor equip and soon collapsed, completely drained of her power. Urza couldn't believe what had happened, and Kiria's eyes widened as she realized that Laxus had won. However, Urza suddenly started laughing, causing Kiria to wonder why. Laxus, confused, asked Urza why she was laughing, assuming she had another hidden technique. Urza admitted that she had used all her power and had lost. Laxus then asked why she was laughing if she had lost, to which Urza responded that she was happy. She explained that ever since they left for the 100-year quest, she had been worried about the guild's defense line. But seeing how strong Laxus had become, she felt reassured and had nothing more to worry about. Laxus and Kiria stared at her as Urza continued, saying that now she understood why Natsu looked up to him. Although he was currently under the White Mage's control, once that was settled, there would be nothing left to worry about for the guild. Urza laughed because she felt relieved by Laxus's power, but promised that next time, she would surely win. Finally, Urza lost consciousness and collapsed, and Laxus, exhausted, sat down, saying that he should have been the one to say that. He admitted he had no magic power left either, and soon collapsed from exhaustion. Kiria, thrilled by the battle, was hyped up by the monstrous strength of the two. She felt lucky as she could now devour the lightning dragon since he was exhausted. But first, she decided to break the orb. She did so, causing a powerful tremor throughout the city. The wood dragon began to stir once more, prompting the residents to comment on the dragon's unusual activity and wonder if it was related to the wizards roaming the town. Some residents even considered running away in fear. Wendy, Gray, Kana, Juvia, and Lucy also felt the tremor and speculated that another orb had been broken. At the backside church, Toka informed Natsu that the third orb had been broken, surprising Natsu and Happy. Toka explained that only the orb with them and the one in the left shoulder city remained, so they needed to protect those. If all the orbs were broken, the White Mage would gain the power of the Wood Dragon God. Happy, confused, asked Toka if she wasn't the White Mage herself, to which Toka affirmed, but explained that the White Mage was currently asleep. As she spoke, the White Mage interrupted, confirming her statement and grabbing everyone's attention. Toka's head ached as the White Mage demanded to know who said she could revert to her cat form. Toka tried to stop the White Mage, but her head hurt even more as the white mage silenced her. Struggling, Toka urged Natsu and Happy to stop the white mage, regardless of what happened to her, worrying Happy. Toka expressed that this might be their last meeting, wanting to say she was happy to have met Happy. Happy felt concerned for her, and soon Toka could no longer resist the white mage, reverting to her human form. The white mage commented that it was quite some negligence on her part. With a serious look, the white mage faced Natsu and said they met again, but now it's time for him to go silent. Natsu stared at her intensely, the atmosphere thick with tension. The white mage commented that it was just in time because Natsu himself would break the orb behind him. Natsu was puzzled, and the white mage suddenly cast white out on him. He tried to resist, but soon he couldn't move and shouted for the white mage to fight him fairly. The white mage replied that unfortunately, her objective wasn't to fight, but to erase any powerful magic, like Natsu's guild and the 5 pentadrakes. Natsu asked if she was rejecting all magic, but she clarified that while magic was necessary, overly powerful magic was evil. Natsu struggled against the whiteout, and Happy ran towards him in concern, but the white mage noticed and kicked him away. Happy lost consciousness, and Natsu asked the white mage if she and Happy weren't from the same race, to which she replied that she was human. Natsu pointed out that Toka was a cat, but the white mage explained that she was just inside that cat's body, choosing to appear human because it wasn't proper to show up as a cat. Natsu then asked why she entered a cat in the first place, but she silenced him, saying that was enough talking. The white mage began to drain Natsu's magic, and he struggled to resist. The white mage stated that once she drained all his magic, the whiteout would succeed, and Natsu would become her puppet, obeying her commands. Happy regained consciousness and decided to grab the orb. He threw it at the white mage, hitting her solidly in the back. The orb inflicted significant damage on the white mage, and shards and would gradually envelop her body, causing her to scream in pain. Happy commented that he just thought to try it and didn't expect it to work so well. He quickly went to Natsu, lifting him to get them away from the white mage. Natsu asked what he did, and Happy explained that he threw the orb at the white mage because when she possessed Juvia, she mentioned she couldn't break the orbs with her power, so she used others' powers. Happy speculated that the white mage couldn't handle the orbs herself. Natsu praised Happy, saying he was impressive, and Happy admitted he didn't expect it to work that way. Happy looked back at the white mage and remembered what Toka told him, gathering his courage to say that she should wait for them because they would surely save her. The orb rolled in front of the white mage, and she tried to grab it, but it caused shards to pierce her hand again. Furious, she declared that Natsu and Happy had now angered her. Meanwhile, back in the right-hand city, Elfman and Mira continued their fight against Skarian and Madmol. Elfman and Mira commented on their powerful opponents, noting that even together, they couldn't defeat them. Skarian and Madmol admitted they were also surprised by Elfman and Mira's strength. Skarian decided to retreat, surprising Madmol. He explained that Kyria and Wraith had been defeated, either because there were too many enemies or Fairy Tail was exceptionally strong. Both Skarian and Madmol turned to Ash, saying they'd settle their fight with Elfman and Mira next time. Elfman was annoyed because they ran away from the fight, but Mira stopped him and asked if he thought they would win even if they continued. After seeing everything that happened, Juvia thought it was a good chance to act, but Kana and Lucy pointed out that their problem was how to take down Mira. Grace suddenly said to leave it to him and explained that Mira was already somewhat injured, so it should be fine. Juvia, Kana, and Lucy were stunned and commented on how cowardly he was, saying it in a cool way and mentioning that Elfman was also there. Meanwhile, back at the right-hand church, Kyria was on top of Laxus, ready to eat him. Skarian suddenly told her that they should retreat and return to their base. Kyria was irritated and explained that she had found a delicious man and wanted them to wait. Skarion explained that the man was being controlled by the White Mage, so if she ate him, she would fall under the White Mage's control. He added that Wraith had also been defeated, so it seemed they underestimated their opponent's power. Kyria agreed that their enemies were absurdly strong. She stared at Laxus before leaving and said that Laxus was a fine man and that she wanted to see him again. We then returned to Skarion and Madmol, where Madmol asked Skarion how they would explain what happened to their master. Skarion said they could only report what happened and added that there were other dragon gods remaining, so they had to leave. As Madmol was about to reason, he noticed Skarion was silent, realizing what Skarion meant. Skarion agreed with his thoughts and explained that if it was something they couldn't do alone, their guild might use their strongest force, the Black Dragon Slayer Cavalry. After that, we moved to the right-hand city, where Skarion also informed Nebaru while he was fighting Wendy. However, Nebaru said he didn't care, which irritated Skarion. Nebaru shouted that he would eat Cuckoo first, and Wendy yelled back that she wasn't Cuckoo and she wasn't food. Wendy used Dragon Force, breaking the cocoon around her. Nebaru noticed this and said he could do it too. But he pointed out that the 5th generation's Dragon Force was a bit different. He planned to use it, so Skarion tried to stop him, saying it was forbidden. Wendy couldn't believe that a 5th generation Dragon Slayer would use Dragon Force, while Skarion and Madmol were also worried about what was happening. Madmol immediately urged Skarion to intervene and stop Nebaru from using Dragon Force because it was forbidden in their guild. However, Skarion fell silent for a moment and then said that they couldn't allow it, and they shouldn't report more shame to their master. When Madmol tried to reason, Skarion explained that since things had escalated to this point, they would discard Nebaru and tell their master that he died while rampaging. Moreover, Skarion mentioned that while using Dragon Force, Nebaru would surely take down some Fairy Tail members. Nebaru's bracelets shattered, and his aura grew even more intense. He said he would devour Wendy, and as he transformed, Wendy couldn't believe the overwhelming magic power she felt, as if her body was coiled and melting. Nebaru's magic power was terrifying, and soon, his transformation completed, making him look like Venom, with large muscles and a long tongue. He immediately charged at Wendy with a punch, which she struggled to block. He followed up with a palm strike imbued with magic aimed at Wendy's body, which solidly connected, sending her flying into the air and tearing her clothes. Nebaru quickly moved behind Wendy to strike again, hitting her with a powerful double hammer fist on her back, slamming her to the ground and causing a building to collapse. Despite the rubble, Wendy managed to stand but coughed because of it. She saw Nebaru charging again, so she tried to counter with Sky Dragon's roar, but Nebaru matched it with Sticky Dragon's Glooly roar. Wendy's attack was ineffective, leaving her shocked that her wind magic didn't work against Nebaru. Nebaru threw a sticky substance at Wendy, binding her arms and hands, and pulled her in different directions, leaving her exposed. Nebaru rushed in for a solid punch, prompting Wendy to use Deus Corona to boost her elemental resistances. Despite her preparation, the pain from Nebaru's left straight punch was immense. Nebaru followed with another punch to Wendy's other side, and then another to her face. When Nebaru grabbed Wendy and stared at her closely, he realized she had reverted to her normal form. Thinking Wendy was dead, Nebaru touched her face, causing her to moan, which made him happy she was still alive. He removed the bindings from Wendy's arms and legs, attaching her to the ground instead, and asked her which part of her body she wanted him to eat first. Wendy couldn't respond due to her injuries, frustrating Nebaru, who covered her nose and mouth with the sticky substance, causing her to choke and struggle to breathe. Wendy shook her head to free herself while Nebaru enjoyed watching her suffer. Eventually, Nebaru removed the substance from her nose and mouth and asked again if she would answer, and where she wanted him to start eating her. As Nebaru questioned her, Wendy began to cry, which Nebaru noticed. Wendy thought she had overestimated her strength, explaining that she had always been with Natsu and the others, with Carla and Kelia, so she could be stronger. Her tears continued to fall as she realized she was helpless alone, and her crying caused Nebaru to pause, thinking it wasn't enjoyable anymore. Wendy admitted she was scared, but she wasn't crying out of fear. She was ashamed of herself for overestimating her power. She didn't want to use what she was about to use, but since she was so weak alone, she had no choice. While asking for strength from someone, she managed to free her arms and legs from Nebaru's bindings, surprising him. She explained that she would use a residual thought enchantment that she could probably only use once. The memory within her body connected her to someone, and she cast a spell, transforming her body using Enhance Irene Berserian. Nebaru was shocked when Wendy transformed, and Wendy explained who Irene Belserian was. She said Irene was the one who once stole her body, switching their bodies and hearts, and that their time bonding had remained as a residual thought until now. Wendy released a powerful aura and shouted that this wasn't all of Irene's magic power, but she had enchanted a portion of it into her body. She called it the power of the Mother of Dragon Slayer magic, and quickly charged at Nebaru, delivering a powerful punch. Her attack hit Nebaru solidly, sending him flying and causing him to spit out saliva from the impact. When Nebaru looked at Wendy, she immediately followed up with a kick to his face and a right hook, sending him flying again with a palm strike to his chin. Despite this, Nebaru seemed unfazed and even praised Wendy, saying she was amazing. His muscles grew larger, and he quickly charged at her. He kneed Wendy in the face, sending her flying, and seemed to go crazy with excitement, gradually transforming into a monstrous form. Wendy wondered what kind of power this was and thought that Nebaru had gone berserk. As Nebaru continued his relentless assault on Wendy, his transformation into a monster became more apparent. Wendy distanced herself by tumbling away, her eyes widening as she saw him transforming into a monster. She thought to herself that this might be the compensation for the dragon force of the 5th generations. Nebaru's transformation made him look more like a dragon, surprising Wendy as she recognized it as the dragonification progression. Nebaru prepared to attack her again, sending a claw attack her way, but she blocked it, only for Nebaru to follow up with a straight left strike. Despite using Irene's power, Wendy was still being overwhelmed. As Wendy retreated, a voice in her head asked what she was doing there, calling her Little Shrimp. It turned out to be Irene, who explained that Wendy was only using 1% of her magic. Wendy wondered how this was possible, so Irene pointed out that Wendy had enchanted herself with Irene's power. Even so, Wendy questioned why she could hear Irene's voice, and Irene told her they would talk later. Irene instructed Wendy to state her desire, promising to lend her power. As Nebaru continued to toy with her, Wendy shouted that she wanted Irene's power to defeat the enemy in front of her. Irene asked if Wendy wanted the power to kill her opponent, but Wendy said she didn't want to kill anyone, just to defeat them. Irene accepted that their meanings of defeat and kill were different. However, she added that Nebaru couldn't be defeated in his current state, as a dragon slayer who had reached such a level of dragonification couldn't return to normal. Wendy looked at Nebaru with concern, and Irene added that there was no other way but to kill him, which Wendy refused. Suddenly, Wendy's body moved on its own, seemingly controlled by Irene. Wendy was amazed by Irene's power but tried to stop her, unable to do so as Irene raised their hand, saying this was her power. Nebaru's eyes widened as Wendy screamed no, and a large, powerful beam shot into the sky, catching the attention of those in the city, including Natsu. Natsu wondered what it was, seeing it came from Right Shoulder's city, and immediately instructed Happy to take him there. After the attack, the entire area around Wendy and Nebaru was destroyed, and Wendy was worried about what had happened. Nebaru's body returned to normal, and he lay in the rubble. He groaned in pain from Irene's attack, which relieved Wendy as he was still alive. Irene explained that she used a separation enchantment similar to what she did when extracting the fairy heart from Mavis. Wendy, in disbelief, asked if Irene had separated Neberu's power from his body, and Irene confirmed it, saying that now Neberu was dead as a wizard and couldn't use magic anymore. Irene said Neberu would suffer a bit from magic deficiency, but it didn't mean the magic itself had disappeared, and eventually, the magic within him would recover once more. Wendy was amazed by what Irene had done, and Irene, becoming serious, mentioned that if only she had used this magic 400 years ago, showing a scene of Irene undergoing dragonification. Wendy was curious, but Irene brushed it off. Wendy reminded Irene of what had happened to her, so Irene explained that by pure coincidence, at the moment of her death, she had enchanted her personality into Wendy, surprising Wendy. Irene said she emerged because Wendy tried to use her power. Wendy asked if that meant Irene was still alive, and Irene clarified that it was hard to say she was alive if it was just her personality. Her remaining magic was also depleted after that, which Wendy understood. Irene explained that until she found a new body, she would remain dormant in Wendy's body, leaving Wendy speechless. Irene suggested she would only interfere when necessary and advised Wendy not to tell Urza to avoid trouble. After that, Irene said that before she went back to sleep, she would teach Wendy how to defeat the White Mage. She would teach her the separation enchantment, and Wendy would return the White Mage to two separate beings. In the next scene, Natsu and Happy arrived at the city and noticed Wendy standing amidst the rubble. Happy saw something strange, as it looked like Wendy was talking to herself. Natsu took a closer look at Wendy and was bewildered because it seemed she was speaking alone, thinking she had become a delinquent. Suddenly, Natsu remembered Wraith and thought they might be dealing with another ghost, so he decided to become a thought projection again and lay down. However, he couldn't do it, so he loudly asked Happy how to become one, leaving Happy confused and unsure of how to respond. Wendy noticed them and asked what they were doing, startling them. Natsu immediately asked if she was okay because he and Happy saw her talking to herself. Wendy agreed and explained that she was talking to an invisible acquaintance. Thanks to that, she said, it looked like she could use a separation enchantment. Natsu asked what that was, and Wendy explained that it was originally a spell that separated magic from a person. However, if she used it, it might be possible to split the dual personality of the White Mage into two separate people. Happy stared at her and asked if she could bring Toka back to normal. Wendy was confused about who he was referring to, so Happy explained that Toka was one of the White Mage's personalities and was a cat. He recounted how they encountered her but managed to escape, where Natsu corrected him that Happy had kidnapped him. Wendy then asked if they knew where the White Mage was. Natsu explained that she was at the church in the backside city, and since she was in pain, she was likely still there. Therefore, they needed to act and save everyone. But first, they had to help Carla. Happy remembered Carla and began fantasizing about her and Toka. He blushed, thinking about what he would do in his situation when Natsu and Wendy called him, telling him to stop daydreaming as they were about to leave. Meanwhile, Gray was shown injured and exhausted. Kana teased him for struggling against a tired opponent, and Gray shouted that they were talking about Mira, while Juvia cheered him on. Lucy added that at least they had managed to put Mira and Elfman in the cards, along with Makarov, Gajil, and Levy. Gray asked how many of their possessed guildmates were left, and Lucy explained that the toughest ones were Laxus and Jalal. Juvia wondered if they could defeat Laxus, but Kana said they didn't need to worry about that anymore. According to her fortune-telling, neither Laxus nor Jalal were in any condition to move or fight. Gray asked if Kana knew where they were, and she said she knew Laxus' location but had difficulty tracking Jalal since he wasn't a guild member. Juvia asked excitedly if Kana could locate everyone using her fortune-telling, while Plu, feeling down, thought he was no longer needed. Lucy comforted Plu, telling him it was okay and that his nose was still useful. Kana said she could find the general location but still needed Plu's nose when they got closer, which made Plu happy again. Gray and Lucy then suggested that if Laxus was no longer in fighting condition, they should imprison him in a card. Inside the church, Wendy helped Carla get out of the sticky substance created by Nebaru, and she was happily greeted by Happy and Natsu. They also saw Warren, Max, and other guildmates unconscious inside, and Wendy commented that she felt sorry for them but found it conveniently helpful. Happy asked Carla if she was hurt, to which Carla replied that she was fine. Happy blushed as he stared at Carla, who then asked him in a snobbish tone why he was looking at her like that. Suddenly, Happy exclaimed that she was truly a cutie, causing Carla to blush and irritably respond, asking what he was talking about and calling it disgusting. Natsu suddenly yelled that they should go to the White Mage, which puzzled Carla. Natsu started to explain that the White Mage was actually inside a cat and that Wendy was going to separate them. Carla grew even more confused, so Wendy took over the explanation. She clarified that apparently, the White Mage and an Exceed named Toka shared a split personality, and she needed to split them into two beings with a separation enchantment. Carla was shocked and couldn't believe that Toka was an Exceed because they knew all the Exceed in Earthland. They knew all the Exceed sent from Idolas 14 years ago, and the Exceed who came to this world after Idola's magic disappeared 8 years ago, as her mother, the Queen, made a list of names and kept track of everyone. Happy added that they sometimes visited the version of that world in Exdalia. Carla pondered the implications, wondering if Toka was a surviving Exceed. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, catching everyone's attention. Wendy commented that the sensation was similar to when an orb was destroyed. Natsu immediately urged everyone to rush to the White Mage. Meanwhile, Gray and the others also felt the stronger tremor and decided to quickly find the rest of their companions. In Left Shoulder City, it was revealed that the orb there had been destroyed, and Mest was responsible. He noted that only one orb remained and decided to head to the White Mage. At the backside city church, Mest found the White Mage collapsed on the floor. He rushed to her side, concerned, and introduced himself. The White Mage recognized him as the teleporter and mentioned that things would have been easier and faster if she had left the task to him. The White Mage pointed out the location of the last orb and ordered Mest to destroy it immediately, so they can seal all the power of Alderaan, the Wood Dragon God. Mest shouted that he would do it, while the White Mage continued explaining that once the orb was destroyed, the 5 cities would perish along with Alderaan. She declared it would be a significant blow to powerful magic, ushering in an era of white peace in the world. Mest agreed, saying he believed her, and destroyed the last orb at that moment. Happy and Carla carried Natsu and Wendy, struggling to stay airborne due to the intense tremors. Meanwhile, Gray, Juvia, Kana, and Lucy could no longer stand because of the shaking. The White Mage appeared maniacal, shouting for Alderaan to perish so she could claim his power. Alderaan roared loudly, causing various cities on his body to crumble. As he stood up, towns and cities continued to collapse, worrying Gray and his companions, who exclaimed that this couldn't happen. People fell into the cracks forming in the towns, and Kana watched in terror. However, a townsperson approached and reassured them that they didn't need to worry as they had long awaited this day. Gray was surprised, so the woman who approached explained that they were part of Alderaan. A plant grew from the woman's arm, and she explained that from the beginning, they were different. This shocked everyone as they watched people gradually turn into roots. The woman continued to explain that for many months and years, Alderaan rested his body. He linked the 5 orbs to his body to keep it dormant, and because of this, they, the seeds, lived. They would die on this land to become part of Alderaan. Lucy wondered what the woman meant by seeds. The woman clarified that they were the nutrients to heal Alderon's wounds. Gray shouted, asking what she was talking about. She explained that someone broke the 5 orbs to defeat Alderon, but they were wrong. Breaking those orbs released the shackles of the wood dragon god, and now he has been restored. The people completely transformed into roots, shouting their prayers to the many trees and calling Alderon their king. A massive crack appeared in front of Gray, so he quickly urged everyone to find shelter. Lucy hesitated, concerned for the others in the town, but Gray explained that they couldn't do anything for now and could only pray for their well-being. Alderon fully stood up, causing tremors felt by everyone in the city, and his horns ignited. The wood dragon god stood like a final boss in a game, and soon he roared powerfully, creating a shockwave and sound wave so strong it was deafening. Lucy's ears hurt from the roar, and Juvia worried about Gray, thinking if she had her magic, she could help. Suddenly, water enveloped Gray's head, and he commented that it suddenly became quiet for him. Juvia was surprised, and Lucy and Kana wondered why Juvia could suddenly use magic again. Juvia didn't know why, but her magic had been restored. Lucy speculated that perhaps everyone's powers affected by the White Mage's whiteout spell had returned. Lucy was correct. Various fairy tale members were shown dazed and confused about what was happening and where they were. The cities on Alderon's body continued to crumble. Laxus, now back to normal, carried Urza, wondering what was happening and why Urza was so beaten up. As he left the church, he angrily vowed to find the person responsible. Meanwhile, Jalal also returned to normal, bewildered by the situation, and the White Mage couldn't believe Alderon had revived. She exclaimed that she was told Alderon's power would be hers if she broke all the orbs. Mest, now back to normal, immediately demanded to know what the White Mage had done to them, where they were, and what was happening. The White Mage was shocked that her whiteout spell was broken and screamed in disbelief, asking how and what was happening. Soon, Natsu and the others arrived, with Natsu shouting that he should be the one asking those questions. Mest was surprised when they arrived, and Wendy was equally shocked. Natsu noted that Mest seemed to be controlled too, and Mest pointed out that the orb there was broken. Mest couldn't believe he had been controlled, so he quickly reviewed his memories, and his eyes widened at his realization. Did he mean that he wasn't controlled? He explained that he had been controlled, but the effect was removed. He was irritated because he understood the general situation now, and it had become really bad. Carla asked if he had enough magic to gather everyone, and he confirmed that he did and that he would handle it. When Mest was about to warn Natsu to be careful of the White Mage, Natsu replied that he already knew that. The White Mage's hands began to tremble, and Natsu stated that the situation was bad because Alderon had started moving, but they would deal with the White Mage first. Wendy then said she would separate the White Mage from Toka. In the White Mage's mind, she lamented that her power was gone, and she had been deceived by the woman she had spoken to, blaming her for all this. In the next scene, we suddenly shift to Black Moon Mountain, where a woman is in a hot spring, mentioning that Drasil means the town where a dragon is sealed. The White Mage should have noticed the name of that town. The woman emerged from the hot springs, stating that the role of the White Mage ended here. While getting dressed, she wondered what would happen now that Alderon's seal was broken. Sitting by the window and drinking sake, the woman remarked that things should be even more distorted to highlight the perfection of the full moon. After drinking, she added that the world should become ugly and distorted as long as the moonlight still shines, revealing that this woman was one of the 5 dragon gods, the moon dragon god Selene. Alderon's continued movements caused the destruction of all the cities on his body, while our friends tried to survive and reach a safe place amid the chaos. Alderon lifted his head, causing the backside city to tilt, making Natsu and Happy lose their footing while they were still inside the church. Happy asked if everyone who was controlled by the white mage had returned to normal. Carla replied that she didn't know for sure, but it seemed the spell had been lifted. The white mage still looked in disbelief, and Natsu signaled Wendy to proceed with the important task. Wendy prepared to use the separation enchantment on the white mage and Toka. As she did, a powerful aura emanated from her and the white mage. The white mage trembled, and Toka slowly emerged from her body. Wendy called out for Irene to lend her strength, confusing Natsu, who asked who Irene was. Wendy told him not to worry about it. Wendy exerted all her power and eventually managed to separate Toka and the white mage. The white mage was left weak and unable to move, while Toka lay unconscious. Happy and Carla were thrilled with Wendy's success, praising her, while Wendy panted with exhaustion. Suddenly, the church began to collapse, so Carla and Happy urged everyone to hurry and leave the building. Seeing the white mage still lying on the ground, Natsu decided not to leave her behind and carried her. When questioned by Happy, Natsu irritably explained that he didn't really know why he was doing it, just that he felt he should. Carla pointed out that the white mage said she would seal Alderaan by breaking the orbs, and Wendy noted that breaking the orbs actually awakened Alderaan. They managed to escape the collapsing church just in time. Natsu instructed Happy and Carla to take Toka and the white mage to safety, noting that Wendy seemed to have used up all her magic. Wendy asked Natsu what he planned to do, to which he replied that he had a job to do, and that is dragon extermination. The scene then showed Alderaan's entire massive body, now moving around and causing destruction. Natsu noticed something flying in the air, a fleet of airships heading toward Alderaan, prompting Natsu to wonder what they were. It turned out to be the Giltina Magic Council, Peace, sent to take down the awakened ancient monster, the Wood Dragon God. Division Chief Robert ordered his troops to begin the Operation Wood Dragon God Suppression, and they confirmed their readiness to attack. The operators reported that all the convergence cannons, Uranus gunports, were at critical point, and Robert ordered them to fire. The airships launched a barrage of powerful cannon attacks at Alderaan's face, leaving Natsu bewildered. The fairy tale members also witnessed the magic power, with Juvia comparing it to the Jupiter cannon but noting it was even stronger. Gray couldn't believe the Giltina Council had such powerful magic, and Lucy shouted for everyone to take cover. The Council's massive attack hit Alderaan's face, but it had no effect on the Wood Dragon God. Alderaan countered by summoning trees from the ground, destroying the airships as if they were mere bubbles. The Council's air army was quickly annihilated, leaving the troops in disbelief, and Robert could only gape in shock. Alderaan roared mightily after obliterating the airships. The remnants of the airships fell from the sky, and Natsu watched in stunned silence. As the debris fell, a wounded Robert cried out that their force was completely annihilated. Meanwhile, in Ignia's lair, Ignia watched the events unfold and commented that human weapons are ineffective against a dragon god. Celine also observed the chaos, remarking that Alderaan was truly enraged and offering him the world to destroy as he pleased. The Giltina Magic Council was powerless against Alderaan, whose power and consciousness have now awakened. The structural integrity of the 5 towns built on Alderaan's body is in poor condition. Natsu stood in the middle of the town located on Alderaan's back. He didn't fully understand what had happened but knew that Alderaan was immensely powerful, having witnessed the swift destruction of the entire squadron of ships from the Giltina Magic Council. Natsu wondered how he could defeat such a colossal enemy, and he noticed something unusual in the town. Suddenly, all the people disappeared, and Natsu thought they might have all run away. However, he had no choice but to fight Alderaan, so he ignited his right fist and targeted the ground, using the Fire Dragon King's Destruction Fist. This attack caused a massive and powerful explosion impact on Alderaan, but when zoomed out to the perspective of Alderaan's massive size, it seemed like a small pop. Zooming back in, Natsu's attack was incredibly powerful, but Aldebaran barely reacted. Natsu was irritated that his attack hadn't caused any damage. Suddenly, a small sprout appeared on the ground behind him, saying he had done 1 point of damage to Aldebaran. The sprout explained that Aldebaran had 100 million points of stamina, so Natsu would need to repeat his technique 99,999,999 more times to bring Aldebaran down. Natsu asked who it was, and it replied that it was a portion from Aldebaran's back. As it spoke, it gradually grew into a humanoid form. It introduced itself as part of the wood dragon god, calling itself the Godseed Wolfen. It looked a lot like I Am Groot. Natsu became somewhat worried, and Godseed Wolfen stated that all people not part of Aldebaran must be eliminated. Suddenly, it grabbed Natsu's face. Natsu was surprised and angry, so he fought back, grabbing Godseed Wolfen's arm and producing explosions to destroy its long arm. But Godseed Wolfen said it could read something, although it didn't specify what. Meanwhile, in Right Shoulder Town, where Lucy, Juvia, Gray, and Kana were, they were all shocked as numerous Godseed Wolfens emerged before them. Kana was the first to be grabbed by the face by one of the Godseed Wolfens, but she managed to fight it off. This Wolfen mentioned that it could also read something. It explained that it could read the strength of the most powerful being the person they touched could think of. Gray, Juvia, and Lucy were stunned to see one Wolfen changing form in front of them. When the smoke cleared, it had taken on a human form. The form it copied was Gildart's, and Kana was visibly uncomfortable facing her father. The fake Gildarts immediately attacked, punching the ground and causing a powerful impact that sent bricks and cobblestones flying. The Fairy Tail team realized that the Wolfen had copied Gildart's magic and power. Lucy figured out that the Godseeds could create an army of warriors from their memories. Gray was angry with Kana, asking why she thought of Gildarts, but Kana said she hadn't thought of Gildarts, and the enemy was just good at reading minds. Then, a Wolfen suddenly targeted Gray's face, but Gray dodged when it tried to grab his face. Gray and Juvia were nervous and worried, thinking that if the Wolfens read their minds, they might copy Leon or Ur. Kana said that even though their enemy was a fake Gildarts, it was still Gildarts, so they needed to escape and be careful not to be caught by the trees. We then see Laxus carrying an unconscious Urza on his back, irritated by the numerous twig people blocking his path as he ran. Jello was worried about Urza and continued searching for her. Meanwhile, Warren, Max, Loki, and Kanana were desperately running because they were being chased by numerous fake Makarovs copied by the Wolfens that had touched other Fairy Tail members. Meanwhile, in Natsu's battle, the scenario was the same. Natsu was shocked to witness Godseed Wolfen transforming in front of him, explaining that it copied the form and power of the most powerful person in Natsu's memories who could surely kill him. But it turned out to be just a fake Happy. The fake Happy was also shocked, and Natsu said this wasn't a mistake. The fake Happy was angry because it seemed it had misread Natsu's mind and hadn't acquired a powerful being. But Natsu explained that Happy had always been with him from the beginning. The fake Happy panicked, not understanding what was going on in Natsu's mind. Natsu apologized, saying this was the second time that day he had to punch Happy, and with one punch, he sent the fake Happy flying into the sky. Next, many more Godseed Wolfens sprouted around Natsu and took humanoid shapes to eliminate him. But Natsu seemed pleased because they had given him a hint, and now he figured out how he could defeat Aldebaran. The Godseed Wolfens came rushing in like a zombie apocalypse. Gray, Lucy, Juvia, and Kana couldn't run and were forced to stand their ground and fight. No matter how many enemies they defeated, new waves kept popping up. Kana and Lucy suddenly realized that since Juvia's magic had returned, their Fairy Tail friend's magic had also returned. So, they decided to release all the Fairy Tail members they had captured earlier using Kana's cards. However, Gray suggested they not release Makarov yet because he wasn't in any condition to fight. Gajeel, Levi, and Panther Lily were confused about their location. while the three Strauss siblings wondered about the strange robes they were wearing, with Mirajane's lacking undergarments. Romeo, Wakaba, and Mukau asked Lucy for an explanation, but she said she would explain later and asked for their help. Droy, Jet, and Ritas were shocked and scared when they saw the oncoming tree people enemies. Gajeel began attacking the Wolfins with a smile. He was happy because it seemed like they could go all out and be wild in this battle, to which Juvia, Elfman, and Lysana agreed. Lysana took down multiple Wolfins, and Elfman sent them flying, while Mirajane used her Satan Soul. In this form, she unleashed a Satan Blast, crushing a large number of Wolfins. Gray commented on how reliable Mirajane was when fighting on their side. Mirajane then mentioned she had a dream where Gray was beating her up, which Gray vehemently denied in shock. Freed asked Kana about Laxus's whereabouts, but Kana had no clue. Bixlow was worried about Laxus, and Evergreen wondered why she was in a bikini. Juvia told everyone not to let the Wolfins catch them, and Lucy explained that if it happened, the Wolfins would transform into the most powerful person in their minds. Back with Natsu in Backside Town, he continued fighting the Wolfins in his area alone. Despite defeating many enemies, their numbers kept replenishing. He was irritated because he had just thought of a way to defeat Alderaan but couldn't advance due to the numerous Wolfins blocking him. He decided to burn them all with one move, so he took a deep breath to unleash the Fire Dragon's roar. The intensity and range of Natsu's fire were immense, and he spun it around him to ensure no Wolfin escaped his flames. The area around Natsu was filled with smoke after his attack, and he became complacent, not noticing a sprout quickly growing into a Wolfin that suddenly caught him. The Wolfin that caught him said it could now read his heart. Natsu just smiled and told it to read his heart well. The Wolfin was slightly startled as it read Natsu's heart and mind. It then began to transform confidently, stating that Natsu had thought of an incredibly powerful person, and it didn't seem to be happy this time. The result was a fake Zaref, and Natsu happily greeted his brother. Fake Zaref said that even though Natsu was family, he was still part of Alderaan and wouldn't side with Natsu in this battle. But Natsu knew this and also knew that Alderaan was different and that it was crucial for Fake Zaref to protect Alderaan. Fake Zaref reiterated that Alderaan was precious. Next, a new wave of God seeds sprouted, but due to Fake Zaref's curse of Anxalam, the new sprouts immediately died, surprising him, and Natsu began to run away. Moreover, the trees growing on Alderaan also started dying, and it seemed this was Natsu's plan to defeat Alderaan. Natsu knew that Zaref's curse of Anxalam would be effective against Alderaan. Natsu whispered an apology to his brother, knowing that this curse had brought Zaref immense pain, sadness, and despair. He felt a bit guilty using it in battle. Fake Zaref panicked, realizing that if this continued, he would eventually kill Alderaan. Fake Zaref covered his ears due to the immense headache caused by the stressful situation, while Natsu kept running. Fake Zaref realized that if he lingered any longer, Alderaan might sustain massive damage, so he disappeared. However, the damage had already been done, and Alderaan had sustained a decayed body part on his back. There was also a hole where Fake Zaref had been standing earlier. Natsu was puzzled and stopped running because Fake Zaref suddenly vanished. To him, it seemed unfair that the Wolfin could just disappear like that. Natsu then thought that if the sprouts came back, he would make a lot of Zarefs from them, and he was excited about this. While stomping his foot, a sprout suddenly grew under his foot. It quickly grew and caught Natsu's leg. Natsu was shocked, and it pulled him underground, into the earth. In Right Hand City, the same thing happened with the Wolfins there, and they all suddenly disappeared. Fairy Tail wondered why this happened. Then Lucy pointed out a sprout that suddenly grew near them. It also grew very quickly, and Bixlow, Evergreen, and Freed seemed disgusted by it. An upgraded version of Groot introduced himself as Godseed Metro, and his body design showed that he was more muscular and formidable. He announced that he would replace Wolfin in eliminating Fairy Tail. Lysana and Mirajane wondered if the wolfen he was referring to were the enemies they fought earlier. Gajeel and Levy couldn't understand if Metro was switching places with Wolfen. Elfman questioned if the wolfens earlier were too inconvenient for the enemy. Lucy and Gray figured out that the wolfens were replaced because one of them copied a powerful person who did not help Alderaan. Then, Godseed Metro prepared for his first move and summoned many flat-headed golems. Kana, Juvia, and other fairy tale members were nervous about the enemies as they were large and numerous. Metro said that unlike Wolfen's cheap tricks, he would eliminate them all with pure strength. Gray prepared for the next battle, and Gajeel, still smiling with excitement, asked what had happened earlier while they were asleep. Meanwhile, in the city where Urza left Jelal encountered Laxus, who was carrying the still unconscious Urza. Laxus recounted that he remembered seeing Urza beaten up, while Jelal said he woke up naked and tied up. Both of them couldn't understand what was happening, and Laxus mentioned that he had encountered many monsters earlier that also suddenly disappeared. Their conversation was interrupted when an adversary sprouted from the ground behind them. He introduced himself as Godseed Gears. His job was to eliminate the gears that Alderaan didn't need. He had a two-tone cape and black arm sleeves and, so far, looked the most human-like among the three Godseeds that had appeared. Jelal told Laxus to take care of Urza as he intended to face Godseed Gears alone, as Laxus seemed to have sustained damage himself. Jelal insisted that Laxus trust him. Meanwhile, in the city where Wendy, Carla, and Happy were carrying Toka and the White Witch, they were alarmed when they saw something resembling a wooden human. Wendy was worried because she had run out of magic and needed to protect Toka and the White Mage. The enemy approached them and introduced himself as Godseed Doom. He stated that anyone who rebelled against Alderaan was destined to die. Meanwhile, Natsu found himself in the middle of a vast empty space where the entire surroundings were made of thick roots. Natsu thought he was inside Alderaan's belly. Suddenly, a loud voice said there were 5 guardian deities living inside the 5 broken orbs. The voice explained the powers of the 4. Wolfen could read minds, Metro could command a powerful army, Gears was a calculating tactician, and Doom brought death. It also stated that Natsu's existence was a threat. Natsu was irritated because only 4 were explained, so he asked where the 5th one was. The speaker then revealed himself as the 5th Godseed. He emerged from his hiding place and confronted Natsu. He introduced himself as Godseed Alderaan. Natsu asked if he was Alderaan's real form, to which he explained that he was the very mind of Alderaan and the leader of all the Godseeds. Natsu became confident because he only had to fight a human-sized opponent instead of the gigantic dragon he expected. Godseed Alderaan said Natsu was mistaken because he also possessed the full power of Alderaan's giant body. He then demonstrated his strength to Natsu, who suddenly sustained a shoulder wound. Alderaan said Natsu would not be able to touch him, while Natsu screamed in pain. Natsu fell to his knees in pain in front of Godseed Alderaan, who was wearing a shiny crown. According to Alderaan, he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time when he would awaken again. And now is the time when he should crush and claim the entire land of Giltina. Godseed Alderaan recounted that centuries ago, in this very place, the wood dragon god Alderaan rested after being injured in his battle with Acnologia. He also mentioned that the wood dragon god didn't start with such an enormous body, but he was still a giant dragon capable of bearing an entire town even from the beginning. To gather more power, Alderaan built a town on his own body and survived by absorbing nutrients from the people living on him. Over time, Alderaan's body grew larger and larger until he became bigger than the mountains and clouds. At this point, Alderaan realized he could no longer control his accumulated power, so he gave birth to 5 guardian deities and created 5 orbs to suppress it. Natsu realized that the White Mage had no knowledge of this when she decided to destroy the orbs. Godseed Alderaan mentioned that Alderaan was also tired of his long slumber. And now that he had awakened, he would destroy the entire land until everything turned to ashes. Alderaan released his power, and it could be seen that a vast area of land was being destroyed. It was evident that every step Alderaan took was equivalent to a powerful calamity. No ground, road, or building was safe from destruction. Natsu suddenly declared that he would not let this happen, but God Seed Alderaan replied that Natsu could do nothing about it. Then, Alderaan attacked again, hitting Natsu on his right knee, causing Natsu to scream in pain. Natsu was irritated because he couldn't even see God Seed Alderaan's attacks. Meanwhile, in Right Hand City, the entire fairy tale was giving their all to fight the golems of God Seed Metro. But Gajeel was frustrated because his iron attacks weren't affecting them. Then, he was suddenly caught off guard and slammed down by a golem. Levi was worried about him, but Gajeel's reaction was one of increased excitement for the battle. Mira Jane, Elfman, Lysana, Bixlow, Freed, and Evergreen were still managing to fight, but Taurus and Lucy noted that the golems were really strong, and if the battle dragged on, they wouldn't be able to handle it. Gray and Juvia decided they needed to target the main guy, Godseed Metro. The two immediately approached him and used Ice Hammer and Water Slicer. But before Metro could be hit by their attacks, he summoned a golem to destroy the Ice Hammer and block the Water Slicer. Gray was surprised, and Metro stated that for him, power is everything. Juvia noticed something and asked Gray if the main body of the enemy didn't want to attack, which was why he was using golems to protect himself. Meanwhile, in the battle between Godseed Gears and Jello, Jello blamed Gears' companions for beating up Urza. But Gears said he didn't know about that, but he was sure of one thing, and that was about the gears of Jello starting to turn, while Gears also turned his hand in front of Jello. In Wendy's battle, they laid Toka and the White Mage aside to face Godseed Doom, who was excited to play with them. Carla knew Wendy had run out of magic power, so she had no choice but to use her human form to fight. While Happy was thinking if he could transform into a large cat or something else, Carla immediately gave Doom a flying kick, but Doom easily caught Carla's foot. Then, Doom suddenly said that Carla was the first destined to die. As he said this, many bright balls suddenly appeared in the air. But there were too many of them around Carla by the time she managed to pull her foot away from Doom's grip, and Wendy was worried for Carla as the bright balls started sticking to her. Due to these, Carla transformed into a statue that looked like it was made of cotton. Happy and Wendy were shocked and worried for Carla. Doom explained that on the visible flower on Carla's forehead, each petal had 60 seconds before it fell, and once all the petals fell, Carla would die. The two were shocked because there were only 5 petals, meaning they had only 5 minutes to save Carla. Wendy immediately tried to use her magic, abnormal status cancellation, raise. But it had no effect on Carla. Godseed Doom explained that Carla didn't have a change in status, but the fate of death. So he thanked Carla for playing with him. Happy and Wendy, who had run out of magic, were very worried, especially since the first petal of Carla's flower had just fallen. Then Godseed Doom, with a sinister smile, asked them who would be next to play with him. Carla's entire body was covered in white spores, and she appeared to be fully paralyzed. No matter how many spores Happy removed, they just kept growing back, causing both him and Wendy to become anxious since neither Toka nor the White Mage, who were both still unconscious, could help. Doom gave Wendy a frightening smile. Wounded and with only a small amount of magic left, Wendy kneeled, able to perform only a few enchants, which were not enough to attack. Wendy thought about enhancing Happy's attack power, but it didn't seem like a good idea, and there was no hope of Happy winning. She also remembered that she couldn't ask Irene for help again because her magic was also depleted. Just then, Doom attempted an attack on them using Spore Snow. Wendy and Happy were puzzled by this attack that seemed to have large, snow-colored spores falling on them. Doom explained that this was also the fate of death. The spores stuck to Happy and Wendy's bodies. Doom explained that these spores had the ability to absorb life force, causing Wendy to start weakening. Toka and the white mage also got stuck with spores. Happy couldn't move anymore, and God Seed Doom laughed at all of them. Suddenly, a mage arrived and used the sandstorm spell, Sand Rebellion, blowing all the spores away. God Seed Doom panicked, and Wendy was surprised to see Sand. The one who saved them asked if Wendy was okay. Wendy was happy to see Vegeta, Max, Warren, Nab, Redus, Loki, and Kanana arrive. Vegeta said they still didn't fully understand what was happening, but came to help Wendy anyway. Nab said Wendy was safe now. Happy commented that the unreliable brigade had arrived, which angered Warren. Wendy quickly said they needed to defeat God Seed Doom quickly for Carla's sake. The second petal had just fallen, leaving Carla's flower with only 3 petals, meaning they had only 3 minutes left. The unreliable brigade wondered why Carla was covered in so many spores. Doom was pleased because more people had arrived for him to play with. Doom immediately unleashed Spore Stream, hitting everyone. Even though Max tried to counter it with sand, he was still hit. Doom severely weakened them all, calling them trash. This irritated both Max and Wendy. Wendy used all her remaining magic power to enchant all the fairy tale mages who had arrived. They were surprised and amazed by the overflowing power they felt from Wendy's enchantment. Doom wondered why Wendy suddenly collapsed and lost consciousness while saying, "I leave the rest in your hands." Happy was worried about Wendy, but she pleaded with everyone to save Carla. Now, only 2 petals were left on Carla's flower. Everyone was fired up and started to charge at God Seed Doom. Nab began with Seath Magic, Beast Spirit, delivering a powerful punch with Bare the Knuckle. This blow cleared away Doom's spores, surprising him. Then Vegeta readied his stance, and with his dance magic, Doom's body could do nothing but follow Vegeta's dance moves. Doom tripped and banged his head on the ground, and Warren quickly told Loki to make her move. Loki gave Doom a powerful punch which would make God Punch. Next were Redus and Kanana. Kanana used her poison aroma, causing Doom to cough. Redus used sword paint, hitting Doom. God Seed Doom was enraged by them all, preparing his ultimate attack, Spore Big Bang. However, Warren stopped Doom's casting with a flying dropkick, stating that even though they weren't strong wizards, they were still fairy tale wizards. Warren then caused loud noises inside Doom's head. The 4th petal of Carla's flower had fallen, leaving only 1 minute before she died. Everyone steeled themselves, saying that even though they weren't strong individually, when they combined their strengths, there was no enemy they couldn't defeat. As they shouted this, Max gave Doom a powerful punch with his sandstorm magic. But they still hadn't defeated God Seed Doom, who was now even angrier and extremely irritated with them. Happy was nervous seeing Doom still covered in many spores. Max said they were always being saved by Wendy and the others, so now it was their turn to save them. Max then showed a new move he had learned from Agiel. Happy couldn't believe it. Kanana and Loki explained that Max learned it during a recent visit to Alakatasia because the prince there was also a sand magic user. God Seed Doom was worried because of the power Max demonstrated. Max said his magic, even with Wendy's enchantment, was still nothing compared to its true origin. Max then used the magic called Ramelseth, dealing a critical blow to God Seed Doom. Doom screamed as his body slowly dissolved into sand. Everyone was happy because it seemed they had defeated the enemy just in time, without Carla's final petal falling. God Seed Doom evaporated into thin air, along with the spores that paralyzed Carla. Carla couldn't believe she was safe and freed, but immediately worried about Wendy. Happy explained to her that their friends from Fairy Tale had come to save them all. Happy called them reliable friends, which made Warren happy with the new nickname. Now, we see a bright force field surrounding the entire town behind Alderaan. Returning inside to where Natsu is, we see the God Seed Alderaan panicking, unable to believe that Fairy Tale had defeated God Seed Doom and stopped the fate of death. Immediately, God Seed Alderaan attacked Natsu again, but this time, Natsu saw the attack coming and successfully dodged it with a roll. God Seed Aldebaran was furious, and Natsu suddenly asked why his magic seemed to have weakened. Meanwhile, in Right Hand City, we see Bixlow, Freed, Gajeel, Panther Lily, Mira Jane, and even Lucy, still in her star-dressed Taurus form, determinedly fighting the golems. Next, Lucy used Star Dress Mix, Aquarius X Scorpio. With this, she wore an armored bikini with a scorpion tail that had a gun barrel. Macau and Wakaba blushed at Lucy's sexy outfit. Using this form, Lucy combined the power of sand and water dual-element magic. Lucy used Aqua Stream, quickly taking down a golem. The golem's body fell, with the entire right side of its torso disintegrated. Droy and Jet joined Wakaba and Macau in praising Lucy, but her armor quickly disappeared due to the excessive magic used in the last attack. Kana complained about defeating the seemingly endless golems. Mira Jane said they needed to take down the main body, prompting Elfman to shout for Gray. We see that Godseed Metro summoned another bodyguard golem, but Gray and Juvia remained determined to win the fight. Godseed Metro boasted about his power, claiming to be the very power of Aldebaran. He then controlled his giant golem to punch Juvia. The golem shattered the floor where Juvia stood, causing water to splash from it. Godseed Metro was shocked that it had no effect on Juvia, not knowing her body was made of water. Juvia attacked next with Water Nebula, sending a powerful swirling water attack at Metro, but she was surprised when Metro absorbed all the water from her attack. Metro then began to absorb Juvia, causing Gray to panic upon seeing this. Juvia was terrified as she was absorbed, with Gray helplessly watching. Juvia wondered if this was a form of cuckoldry. Gray tried to save Juvia, but before he could grab her hand, Metro fully absorbed Juvia into his body. Godseed Metro crossed his arms, telling Gray that Juvia would serve as a moisturizer for his body. We then see Juvia's body hanging from Metro's chest as he absorbed her water power. Gray was furious at Metro, while Juvia's moans indicated she was still alive. Gray charged at Metro, demanding he release Juvia, but Metro attacked Gray with a water ray from his finger. Gray continued dodging the water ray's trajectory, its powerful water pressure cutting through the surfaces it hit like a laser. Gray then attacked with Ice Make Lance, but realizing he might hit Juvia, he redirected the trajectory of the ice lances away from the enemy. With no other options, Gray was attacked again by Godseed Metro, receiving a powerful punch from the golem. Gray wondered what he could do, needing to be careful not to hurt Juvia. Juvia shouted to Gray not to worry about her, but Gray wasn't sure if he could do that. Deep in thought, Gray was hit by another punch from the golem. The blow hit him hard, causing Juvia to worry about him, while Godseed Metro asked Gray who Juvia was to him. Struggling to get back up, Gray was asked by Metro if Juvia was also his power. Gray confidently agreed, saying that Juvia was his power to live.
Nani?
Juvia was overjoyed at Gray's words. Metro then said it was time for Gray's power to vanish. Gray wondered what Metro meant when steam suddenly appeared in front of Metro. Metro screamed in pain from the heat coming from Juvia. Gray was shocked by what he saw, while Metro panicked from the pain as Juvia turned into boiling water. We then see Juvia intensely heated by the overwhelming joy she felt from Gray's declaration that Juvia was his power to live. Juvia struggled to calm herself, her heart beating rapidly. Gray couldn't understand what was happening to Juvia as Godseed Metro continued to get burned by Juvia's intense steam. Metro was furious, and Gray tried to calm Juvia down, worried that Metro might do something harmful to her, but she couldn't calm down. Then Gray realized he could use his ice magic to cool down the overheated Juvia, so he told her he would borrow her body. Juvia got even more excited at his words. Using Juvia Freeze, Gray turned Juvia's body into ice. Juvia then said she hadn't expected Gray to do that. Gray responded that he had just said he would borrow her body. Juvia's frown quickly turned into a smile. Next, Gray used Juvia Geyser, sending numerous ice pikes from Metro's body. Metro was freezing because Gray had turned Juvia into ice. Then Gray shaped Juvia into his ice hammer, named Juvia Hammer, and they delivered a powerful blow to Metro's neck. As Metro reeled from the powerful attack, Juvia's body turned back into water, forming a puddle. Gray quickly told her it was time for a true unison raid. Juvia returned to her human shape, and she and Gray held hands to use ice and water polar elemental magic. Our ice and water duo unleashed an ice wave, a powerful wave of water that turned into ice upon impact. The wave surrounded Metro in ice, freezing him solid. Metro couldn't do anything because the ice wave was gigantic. Gray and Juvia used up all their strength and magic with that move, but it seemed they had succeeded as the golems fighting Fairy Tail began to disappear. The giant dragon Alderon screamed in pain, and Natsu was puzzled by it. Godseed Alderon felt it too, and was deeply worried when he realized that Fairy Tail had also defeated Godseed Metro. Gray checked on Juvia, asking if her body was okay. Juvia said she hadn't imagined being turned into ice, but complained that her lips felt a bit sore, requesting CPR from Gray. Gray refused, saying she seemed fine. Juvia then asked Gray to repeat what he had said earlier that made her so happy. Embarrassed, Gray declined and told Juvia not to pester him because they still needed to help their friends. Juvia felt sad at Gray's sudden grumpiness, but Gray patted her on the head. Then Gray pulled Juvia close, saying he was just happy that she was safe. Juvia's face clearly showed her deep love for Gray, while Gray hesitated to show affection. The two hurried to join their other companions. Lysana and Elfman thought that Juvia and Gray must have defeated the main body, and even Wakaba and Macau were impressed by the power of their love. Kana, however, was irritated by Macau's comment about the power of love while looking at her. Levi and Gajeel remarked on how bad the town looked. Panther Lily and Droy mentioned they still had no idea where they were and why they were all wearing white robes. Lucy didn't tell them the whole story, but mentioned they were now on top of a dragon. They were then surprised when someone in the distance repeated what Lucy had said. It was Brandish. She said they were too late if they had come to eat Alderon parfait. Fairy Tail was shocked and angry to see Brandish there. Kana asked what she was doing. Brandish replied that she had just said it. She asked if they could manage the dragon somehow, but Fairy Tail members said that if they could, they wouldn't be struggling. Brandish explained that even her Command T wouldn't work on such a powerful target. So, she said she would create something even bigger to defeat Alderon. Elfman and Bixlow were extremely shocked, while Lucy asked if Brandish claim was true, meaning she would create something larger than a mountain. Brandish then reminded them that she was called Brandish the Nation Destroyer. Everyone was suddenly scared by Brandish's words. Brandish said she wouldn't just use anyone since they were up against a dragon. Gajeel was startled as everyone suddenly looked at him. Meanwhile, in the town where Jello was fighting Godseed Gears, they praised each other for their strength. Gears then got serious, saying he was done playing. Jello was surprised as Gears' magic power suddenly increased. When Jello looked at his own body, he saw 2 gears imprinted on it and became anxious. Gears told him that he had just finished calculating, and according to his gears, Jello was an insignificant factor. Jello wondered about the magic circles on his body, and Gears explained that they were gear blades that could steal his thoughts. Jello also asked if this magic reduced his speed. Suddenly, Gears attacked, and Jello couldn't dodge or react to the explosion in front of him. He decided to use Meteor, a magic that granted him speed. He quickly flew and charged at Gears, but was surprised to see Gears watching him with a suspicious smirk. Then he realized that what he saw was only an image projection of his planned move. Jello was extremely puzzled by what was happening to him. Gears then explained that Jello had forgotten how to use magic. Next, Gears delivered a powerful straight right punch, telling Jello that the gears of his mind were no longer aligned. Jello didn't know what to do as his brain was not functioning properly. As he wondered why he couldn't do anything against the enemy in front of him, the image suddenly blurred and then cleared to reveal Urza, which shocked him. He wondered if it was an illusion, but realized there was no point in thinking since he couldn't think clearly. Even as Urza's attack approached, he couldn't move. When he was hit by her left palm fist, it was revealed to be Gears. Gears mocked Jello, asking if this was what he had imagined before his mental gears fell apart. Jello could only accept the pain and collapsed to the ground. Gears insulted him, saying his gears had stopped. Meanwhile, Urza finally woke up, completely shocked. She asked where she was, and Laxus, who was beside her, checked on her. Laxus explained that he didn't know who was responsible, but they were both beaten up badly. Urza, knowing it was Laxus who had beaten her, didn't say anything. She just said it was important that Laxus had regained his sanity. He was then puzzled by her comment. Laxus asked Urza if someone had been controlling him, but Urza told him to let it go. Despite her body's condition, Urza tried to stand up for Jello's sake. She ignored Laxus's advice to stay still, thinking she needed to help Jello. Laxus reassured her that her boyfriend Jello wasn't that weak. Urza blushed and stammered at Laxus, calling Jello her boyfriend. Eventually, she decided to trust in Jello's strength and listen to Laxus. However, the reality was that the tides of Jello's battle against Godseed Gears were not in his favor. He was close to accepting that he would die at Urza's hands. Reflecting on what he had done to Urza, he thought it was fair to be killed by her. Then a voice in his mind asked how long he would keep repeating that. In his neural dimension, surrounded by magic gear circles, a woman approached him from behind, telling him that the witch's sin was gone and his goal now was to live. When Jello turned around, he saw that it was Altair speaking to him. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Altair explained that they were in a time-distorted world where Jello's body and mind were trapped by magic. She added that this had happened to her once before, and she could only exist in a world where time stood still. Altair told Jello that it wasn't about what he had done, but about what Urza had done for him. Jello remembered all that Urza had done for him out of love. As Altair's body began to crumble away, she told Jello that he needed to live for Urza's sake, and this was his new path in life. Jello was moved by Altair's words, and before she completely vanished, she told him not to worry because she knew he could break free from the magic trapping him. This was a heartwarming moment of realization for Jello. He realized that the foundation of this magic was guilt, and every time he stimulated that feeling, his mind became clouded. Jello apologized, saying it was time to bid farewell. Then, another Jello appeared beside him because Jello had separated himself from the man carrying his sins and guilt, Seagrain. Gears was shocked to see this and thought it might be another thought projection. But Gears realized that Jello had transferred his Gears magic to Seagrain to escape. Now, Gears was the one trapped in Jello's magic. Gears was utterly shocked and terrified as 7 beams of light surrounded him, and Jello declared, "May the 7 stars judge you." Jello then unleashed the Grand Chariot, trapping Gears in the center of 7 powerful explosions. Godseed Gears appeared to be completely disintegrated, and Jello told him not to stand in the way of him and Urza, as now, Jello's gears were overlapping with Urza's gears. Would Dragon God Alderaan roared in pain once again due to the defeat of Godseed Gears. This was also felt by Godseed Alderaan, and Natsu witnessed his reaction. Alderaan wondered to himself if humans had grown so much stronger over the centuries since he became dormant. Natsu asked Alderaan if he was a dragon who harbored hatred towards humans. However, Alderaan replied that he felt nothing for the nutrients, and in fact, he didn't even need nutrients with such power. Natsu was shocked by Alderaan referring to humans as nutrients. Alderaan explained to Natsu that he had long started building towns on his body to house generations of humans, whose life force he absorbed. Because of the immense life force he absorbed, he eventually revived. Natsu asked Alderaan if he would eventually run out of nutrients if he continued fighting. Alderaan responded that he no longer needed them because, with the power he possessed now, he could consume other dragon gods. Alderaan then took a ready stance and declared he would begin devouring dragons, starting with Natsu, the brother of Ignia. Natsu replied that while it was true that he and Ignia shared the same father, Zarif was his only brother. Alderaan then attacked, sending a powerful and large shockwave towards Natsu. However, Natsu managed to dodge it, finding it easier to evade now that he could see Alderaan's attacks. In the recent attack, Natsu noticed an energy ball that caused a significant impact and explosion. Alderaan prepared for his next attack, stating that even though his magic had weakened due to the death of the God Seeds, it was still powerful enough to kill Natsu. Alderaan added that he commanded the power of life, meaning that after some time, the God Seeds would revive and his power would return. Natsu quickly charged at Alderaan while he was preparing to attack, arguing that Alderaan wouldn't be able to revive the God Seeds if Natsu defeated him now. Alderaan remained confident in the battle, telling Natsu that it was impossible for a human to defeat him. Alderaan then finished casting Leaf Tempest magic before Natsu could get close, sending a tornado attack with leaves towards Natsu. The attack went straight towards Natsu, who thought that leaves were weak against fire. He immediately used his Fire Dragon's roar and blew fire at the tornado. However, Natsu was shocked to see that the leaves didn't burn in his fire. As a result, Natsu was hit by Alderaan's Leaf Tempest. Alderaan then told Natsu that there were leaves in the world that fire couldn't burn. Irritated by Alderaan's attack, Natsu unleashed powerful flames from his hands to drive away the tornado blocking his path. After doing this, Natsu immediately received a powerful right uppercut to the stomach from Alderaan. Natsu was hurt badly, and Alderaan glared at him menacingly. However, Natsu quickly recovered and counterattacked, delivering a high right kick to Alderaan, which was swiftly blocked by Alderaan's left arm. Natsu followed with a left hook and a straight right, but both were blocked by Alderaan. Alderaan then asked Natsu if he really believed he could defeat him in hand-to-hand combat since Natsu couldn't even hit him. But before Alderaan could finish speaking, Natsu landed a left punch on Alderaan's face. Alderaan was utterly shocked, and it was clear from Natsu's face that he was fully confident in the battle. Suddenly, a strong earthquake occurred, surprising Alderaan. He wondered what was happening outside. It was revealed that the earthquake came from Gajeel's fight with Wood Dragon God Alderaan, where Giant Gajeel delivered a powerful uppercut to Alderaan's chin. Giant Gajeel followed with a left hook to Alderaan's face, and the entire fairy tale cheered for him. However, Levi felt differently. Instead of cheering, she looked pale and worried due to Gajeel's sudden massive growth. While Gajeel and Alderaan exchanged attacks, Lucy asked Brandish if she could make Gajeel even bigger. But Brandish said she couldn't enlarge Gajeel any further as this was his maximum size. Gajeel only had 3 minutes before reverting to normal. Gray and Juvia were shocked, unable to believe Gajeel had only a 3-minute window to defeat Alderaan. Kana, in her anger, scolded Lucy and Brandish, who both became very scared and nervous. Brandish even let out a cute arf-arf like a puppy. Brandish then coughed, realizing she had lost her composure, and explained that Kana reminded her of Aquarius, who was still angry. Lucy worried about Gajeel and their critical mission. Gajeel landed another right punch on Alderaan while Warren's group was surprised to see Gajeel gigantified. The intensity of the battle caused strong earthquakes in the towns on Alderaan's back. Warren and Wendy's group panicked, realizing they needed to leave immediately. Urza and Laxus were also surprised to see Giant Gajeel. Laxus was amazed by Gajeel's monstrous appearance, while Urza couldn't believe Gajeel was now fighting Alderaan. Alderaan suddenly used wood magic, causing giant roots to emerge from the ground and fly towards Giant Gajeel. Levi was worried for him, but instead of screaming in pain, Gajeel smiled and even looked pleased. This was because Gajeel had turned his entire body into iron, rendering Alderaan's magic ineffective. Gajeel then struck Alderaan powerfully, causing the ground where Alderaan's head landed to crumble. The impact was so intense that the towns on Alderaan's back, where the entire fairy tale was, were destroyed. As the towns collapsed, fairy tale members fell from the cities on Alderaan's back to the ground below. Natsu and God Seed Alderaan could also feel the intense earthquake. Enraged by humans, God Seed Alderaan decided to show them his magic, called Thicket of Arms. Alderaan didn't waste time and immediately began casting Thicket of Arms. Alderaan unleashed spikes all around Natsu, who was extremely shocked by their sheer number. Millions of spikes flew towards Natsu from all directions simultaneously. He tried to dodge them one by one, but a spike hit his right hand as he did a backflip. This caused Natsu to lose balance and fall face first to the ground. He was now in a precarious situation with many more spikes approaching. Nevertheless, he managed to stand up quickly and dodge the incoming spikes. Alderaan's magic attack wasn't over yet, as there were still countless spikes raining down on Natsu. Despite the onslaught, Natsu continued to evade the spikes, but one embedded itself in his right foot, causing him to jump in pain. However, Natsu had no time to give up or slow down, so he steeled himself for the difficult battle ahead. Meanwhile, in the battle between Giant Gajeel and Wood Dragon God Alderaan, spikes were seen emerging from the back of Alderaan's neck. Juvia, Gray, and even Giant Gajeel were shocked by this. Then, numerous spikes shot out from Alderaan's nape towards the Fairy Tail members, resembling a rain of thorns, causing great concern among Droy, Jet, Wakaba, Macau, and the other Fairy Tail members. Seeing this, Giant Gajeel hurriedly used his back as a shield against the millions of thorns heading towards his friends. Gajeel continued to smile and boast that he wasn't hurt, even though Alderaan's attack clearly had a significant impact on him, which worried Levi greatly. Despite Gajeel's massive size, Elfman, Mary Jane, and Lysana saw that he couldn't block all the thorns. Some still hit the ground, causing widespread destruction. Angry at Alderaan, Gajeel delivered an elbow to Alderaan's forehead and grabbed his head. He followed up with a knee strike to Alderaan's head, and in retaliation, Alderaan used his magic again. Alderaan summoned a super giant spike from beneath him, aiming at Gajeel's torso. Levi and Lucy were extremely worried, and Brandish noted that Gajeel's time was up, causing him to shrink back to his normal size. As a result, Gajeel avoided a direct hit from the giant spike, which continued past where the Fairy Tail members had fallen earlier. The super giant spike's impact with the ground caused a powerful continuous shockwave. The force of the impact sent the Fairy Tail members flying into the air. Levi asked Gajeel if he was okay, and it was impressive that he was somehow still alright. Panther Lily commented that, in the end, Gajeel couldn't defeat Alderaan, but Gajeel argued that no one could defeat an enemy as large as Alderaan. Brandish disagreed, pointing out that Gajeel seemed to have put Alderaan to sleep with his last attack. Gajeel was pleased with this, but more thorns suddenly emerged from Alderaan's back, heading towards them. Freed shouted that a rain of blades was coming. Fairy Tail members could do nothing to stop or block the rain of blades and suffered many injuries. Even Laxus and Urza, who were still in the town on Alderaan's back, received their share of the millions of spikes and had no idea what was happening. A spike hit Laxus in his right shoulder, and Urza was worried about him. Jello then pointed out a place they could go to for safety. Warren and Wendy's group continued to search for shelter as their town was also bombarded with spikes. Meanwhile, a spike hit Lucy in her left leg, causing Kana to worry about her. Lucy fell to the ground as the rain of blades ended, then looked up at Alderaan's head, which was sleeping. She remembered Natsu and wondered how he was doing. Godseed Alderaan continued to rain spikes on Natsu, who was now covered in many wounds. Despite this, Natsu didn't give up fighting, even when Alderaan told him their sword dance would continue until he killed Natsu. Natsu tried to attack Alderaan by sending fire from his fist. However, when he punched with his right fist, a spike intercepted it, piercing his hand. Natsu felt intense pain from this, and as the pain immobilized him, he forgot to dodge the next spikes, resulting in many spikes hitting him simultaneously. Natsu was on the verge of losing consciousness from his numerous wounds. Godseed Alderaan bade farewell to Natsu, saying this was the fate of a human defying a god. But Alderaan was shocked to sense that Natsu still had the power to fight. Then, all the spikes embedded in Natsu's body turned to ash in his flames. Natsu realized he could burn Alderon's spikes if he reached a certain heat point because some things couldn't withstand high temperatures. Natsu smiled and was fired up again for the battle. Natsu was burning with intensity, and the god seed Alderon couldn't believe that a mere human would dare resist the power of a god. Natsu just smiled at his words. Alderon remarked that he didn't seem human. He was the son of a dragon and possibly a demon as well. Natsu replied that he didn't care what he was because he had friends and people who believed in him. Outside, Lucy looked worried for Natsu. Natsu charged forward, declaring that there he is no one but him, Natsu Dragneel of Fairy Tale. He landed a powerful punch, but Alderon retaliated by raining down thorns. Natsu, undeterred, continued towards his goal to defeat Alderon. Alderon was shocked when Natsu used Igneel's fire, which threw him aside. Alderon couldn't understand how a mere human could wield the power of a dragon. He attacked Natsu, stating that humans were meant to be preyed upon. It was too early by 100 years for a human to defy a god. Natsu mentioned that it had been 100 years. Many wizards had tried to beat them for over a century but failed. Their efforts had accumulated over time, and now he was there to face Alderon. Alderon prepared to punch, declaring that all humans were merely nourishment and slaves to him. Regardless of how many years passed, that fact wouldn't change. Alderon insisted that humans could never win against dragons, while Natsu caught his punch with his fist. Natsu felt the wounds all over his body but refused to give up. He asked how many people Alderon had killed. Alderon thought for a moment and replied that he couldn't remember how much food he had consumed. But maybe around 300,000 people had lived on his body over the past century. Each one of them revered him and devoted their lives to him. They were fools because they believed they were blessed. They didn't realize he only used them for nourishment. Natsu's aura changed after hearing that. Alderon added that all humans would bow before him to provide him with nutrition. Despite being covered in blood, Natsu merely stated that Alderon was a bad guy. So, it was a relief for him. Or, maybe he just came to his senses. He mentioned that Merkphobia was a good guy, so they decided that if the 5 dragons were good, they wouldn't fight them. But Alderon was different. He didn't care about human lives and only wanted to hurt them. Thus, Natsu was determined to defeat him here and now. Alderon sarcastically remarked about his convenient reasoning. He questioned whether humans didn't also kill animals to eat. Natsu replied that they did it to survive, not to kill everyone like Alderon. Besides, it was possible for humans and dragons to coexist. Alderon dismissed his words as nonsense and attacked again. He declared that dragons were the pinnacle of all living things. By nature, that's just how it was. It was absurd to even think about conversing with humans. Natsu replied that he was raised by a dragon. Igneel was different, but Alderon called Igneel a fool for lowering himself like that. Natsu ignited in flames and declared Igneel the mighty Fire Dragon King. Alderon was surprised that Natsu used Igneel's fire again, but he noticed something different. He wondered if it was the fire of Atlas Flame or Ignea. He couldn't believe it when he realized it might be a mixture of flames from various dragons. As Natsu prepared to attack, he declared that the flames belonged to him, calling it the Dragon Slayer's secret art, Purgatory Dragon Fire. The immense power of Natsu's attack clearly hurt Alderon. The attack was so powerful that it reached the outside, shocking Natsu's fairy tale comrades. Alderon couldn't believe he was burning. Alderon questioned if Natsu intended to burn the world with that power. Natsu's look was intense after the powerful attack, which significantly damaged Alderon. Urza and Gray were shocked, wondering if Natsu had managed to defeat him. Lucy remained concerned for Natsu as everyone ran away, realizing that Alderon was slowly crumbling. The explosion had caused immense damage, and the colossal dragon was being destroyed. Natsu declared that he would only burn the world if it chose to become an enemy of their guild. After that attack, we shift to the wizard guild Magia Dragon, where Eleftheria noticed the symbols of the dragon gods and realized that Alderaan had been sealed. He commented that wizards had indeed grown stronger over the past 100 years, calling it a radiant era. In Ignea's lair, Ignea was pleased with what Natsu had accomplished and encouraged him to continue burning everything until there was nothing left to burn in the world. Meanwhile, on Black Moon Mountain, Selene lamented Alderaan's defeat, hoping that the White Mage would have made things more interesting. She decided to take over the world herself. At the Wizard Guild Diabolos, George Raisin was eating heartily while Scarian, Kyria, and Madmol watched. Raisin asked if they were saying that Alderaan had turned back into trees or earth, expressing no appetite for that. Scarian informed him that Neberu had gone missing after dragonizing, and Madmol added that Wraith was dead, which irritated Kyria, who pointed out that Wraith was dead in the first place. Raisin questioned if the three of them had run away with their tails between their legs, wondering if they were truly that pathetic or just unlucky. Scarian mentioned the Fairy Tale Guild, catching Raisin's interest. He explained that they had underestimated them, and according to their research, Fairy Tale was the strongest guild in Ishgard, with each member possessing exceptional battle prowess. Kyria cursed Laxus, referring to him as the lightning bastard, prompting Madmol to comment that Kyria had fallen for him. Kyria denied this vehemently, insisting she just wanted to eat him. Raisin then stated that their next target was Selene, the moon dragon god, noting that she had a beautiful body. He declared he would accept no more failures and ordered them to bring her to him, adding that Suzaku would join them. Madmol seemed concerned and shocked by this, and as Suzaku emerged from behind Raisin, he was introduced as one of the Black Dragon Slayer Knights, Suzaku the Red Dragon. Raisin shouted for them to begin and to feed him, as he needed the flesh and blood of a dragon god. Next, we moved to a base, where Lucy started narrating that they had all moved a few kilometers from Draziel, or rather, from where Alderaan was, to a small town called Dramiel. She explained that the place was apparently built for the government to monitor Alderaan, and after Alderaan was destroyed, a huge army showed up. They pretended not to know anything and left, which is why they were there now. She added that she didn't know why, but Makarov and the rest of the guild seemed in the mood for sightseeing, making the situation difficult to explain. Makarov was confused as he tried to understand what had happened to them, while Mira asked about the giant dragon they fought, which Urza couldn't answer properly. Laxus commented that it might be part of the 100 Years quest, and Gray remarked on his sharp mind. Lysana suggested they probably shouldn't ask any more questions. Gajeel asked where Toka was, and Lily irritably pointed out that she was the one who tricked them all. Levi mentioned that Toka had been sleeping since then, and Lucy commented on the complicated situation. Then, we shift to Toka and the White Mage, who were unconscious in bed, being watched over. Max suggested they should tie them up, and Warren added that the White Mage might drain their magic again when she woke up. Wendy assured them that they were safe for now, and that the White Mage wouldn't recover her magic that easily. Natsu, annoyed, said that if she fought, he would beat her up. Max asked if the cat had entered Toka's body, but Warren clarified that Toka was the cat, while Nab remained confused. Happy explained that there was a cat named Toka, and then the White Mage entered her and made her human. Carla expressed disbelief that Toka was an Exceed from the start, leading Wendy to ask if that meant she wasn't from Extalia. Carla confirmed that Toka was an Exceed they didn't know. Natsu angrily declared that they would make sure she talked when she woke up, while Happy tried to make Carla jealous by saying it seemed Toka liked him, to which Carla, with a poker face, asked so what. After that, 3 days had passed since their battle, and Toka and the White Mage still hadn't woken up. During this time, Makarov decided that they should celebrate their reunion in that foreign country. The entire Fairy Tale Guild started enjoying themselves in their own ways. Natsu tried barrel surfing and was having a blast, but soon got dizzy due to motion sickness. Jet and Droy commented on how long it had been since they last saw Wendy, asking if she had grown, to which Wendy replied that she hadn't really changed. Juvia called out to Gray, who immediately turned towards her, seemingly naked, shocking Macau. Juvia hugged Gray, expressing her relief at seeing him safe. Instead of being annoyed, Gray brought his head closer to Juvia and said he felt the same way, surprising their other guild members. Laxus shared his experiences with Freed, while Bixlow and Evergreen talked about what happened to them. Elfman loudly declared he hoped he hadn't done anything unmanly. Meanwhile, Kana kept making Lucy drink even though she was already drunk. Gajeel told Lily that he would tell his future child about how he grew as big as a mountain. Happy continued trying to make Carla jealous by asking what she would do if he ended up with Toka, to which Carla, still with a poker face, simply said nothing.
Would you like to go on a date with me?
But we're friends, though.
You're right.
Natsu invited Elfman to fight him since it had been a long time since their last match, and Elfman agreed. Thus, the celebration of the rowdiest guild in all of Fiori continued, with the restaurant staff commenting on their noise, noting they had been like that for 3 days. During this, we shift to Jalal, whom Urza found standing on a small bridge. Jalal explained to Urza that he wasn't supposed to be part of a guild-only occasion, but Urza said no one would stop him. As they gazed at the river, Urza commented that it had been a long time since they last met, and Jalal agreed. He then mentioned that he had no memory of what happened while he was under the influence of Whiteout, asking if he did anything wrong. Urza blushed, recalling the events, but said there were no problems. Jalal felt embarrassed about the situation he found himself in while chasing the white mage. Teasingly, Urza remarked that here they go, and asked if this was the part where Jalal would say everything was his fault. To which Jalal admitted it was his fault, but said he wouldn't beat himself up over his mistakes anymore, which made Urza smile. He added that he would continue to reflect on his past sins and mistakes, and through that, he would find a path to the future. Urza understood, and Jalal added that this was the meaning of living. Urza commented that he had truly changed. Jalal smiled and held Urza's hand, saying it was all because of her. He then hugged her, saying that now he could love people freely. Urza was surprised but quickly smiled and hugged him back, affirming that it was true.